Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's full council meeting. We have a fairly busy agenda, so I'll ask you to be sort of prompt and relevant to what's going on in order that we may get through it in good time. Item 1, do we have any apologies?
Councillor Phil Bailey, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hilary Jones and Councillor Joe Nater for lateness. He should be here soon.
Okay, item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No, good. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of the Council on the 23rd of July. Do I have a proposer that we accept the minutes, please? Is that seconded? Okay, those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Item 4 is announcements from the Mayor. There is just the one announcement, and that is that I intend to allow a late report, which I will take as item 11A. It relates to investigatory and disciplinary arrangements and procedures. Work on the report has been ongoing, and it was published earlier today with hard copies before each member here in the chamber. Group leaders have been consulted on aspects of the report, and thanks are due for their cooperation. Most of the officers currently in the chamber will have to leave us for that particular item as we get to it. I will explain the procedure I have decided to adopt. Okay. Item 5 is to receive statements from members of the Council Cabinet. There are none. Item 6 is to receive questions from the public. We have 2 questions, both from Mr. Marsden, who I welcome to the chamber this evening. Questions and answers were published earlier today, and there is now an opportunity for supplementary questions, which, and I reiterate, must relate to the response given. Mr. Marsden, do you have a supplementary question in relation to your first question and the answer you received from Councillor Banwaite on Alveston Neighbourhood Board letters?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could Councillor Banwaite just advise which pot of money the councillors on patrol comes out of, please?
The Council on Patrol letters are funded from the Member Services budget.
Mr. Marsden, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer to your second question, which was from Councillor Afzal on community volunteer training?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask how much this training is going to cost Derby City Council to produce and run? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Marsden. The training shouldn't really cost us anything because our neighbourhood officers will have the leaflet and they should be able to do it without any additional cost. Thank you.
Item 7 is questions about Derbyshire Fire Authority or Derby Homes, and there are none. Okay. Item 8 is to receive questions from non-council cabinet members, and we have 17 of them. So I think we'll be here for a while. I would like to maintain sort of a brisk pace, as you all know I tend to do that, so supplementaries and the answers to them will need to be to the point. And I think you all know the kind of latitude I give you, so let's stick to that. Questions and answers were published earlier, so we will move to supplementaries. The first one, Councillor Davis, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on Cadleston Road housing?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Good evening, Councillor Orson. Can you assure me and my constituents that you will robustly oppose any development which will be detrimental to city residents, particularly in Allestree and Darley, and that no homes will be demolished in the Five Lamps area to make way for widening the highway into the city centre, especially when we have been informed there are approximately 12,000 void properties in the city for various reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Davis, my apology, is actually should be Councillor Rawson who's answering this, but it's written wrong here. Not my fault.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, for your question. In terms of the junction at Five Lamps, I can confirm there's no plans that I'm aware of to make any changes at that particular junction. Relating to the wider point about the application which has actually gone to Amber Valley Borough Council because the land falls within their area. I think the reality is that Derby City Council and to a lesser extent Amber Valley actually have very little influence over the housing numbers, which is the real issue here. That's been driven by central government planning process, which unfortunately, despite the taglines of localism, takes away a lot of discretion from local authorities. And indeed, the only reason why these homes are coming forward is because the government planning inspector rejected Amber Valley's original report and came back and asked them to put even more housing numbers in their plan.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. The next question is from Councillor Nater. Now, Councillor Nater, supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Hussain on protecting children from abuse.
I do, Mr Mayor. I just apologise for turning up late. I was at a community event. Basically, just the follow-on is that I just want the assurance from the Cabinet member that any problems that are listed or highlighted in the future would be dealt with appropriately, i.e. people in positions that take these decisions are removed immediately.
Councillor Hussain.
I can assure Councillor Nater that the arrangements in place for protecting vulnerable children are quite robust. And protecting children is everybody's business, and all the partners are playing their part in it. And I'm hoping that the arrangements will not fall apart. They are very robust.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Barker, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Rawson on market hall traders?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I do. Good evening, Councillor Rawson. Can the Cabinet member confirm the existence of a market review research document? That's a proper research document, not one from local people, as to the future of the markets in both wholesale and livestock, and why members of the National Association of British Market Authorities, appointed by this Council, have not been consulted as to its content.
Good evening, Councillor Barker. Thank you for your question. My understanding is that there is a review process going to be going forward over the next few months, and to that end there was a meeting arranged I think last week with market traders to begin that process, and so I can reassure you that members and market traders will be fully involved in that process going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Wood, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Martin on the Darley Park concert?
I do, Mr Mayor. I certainly share Councillor Martin's sentiments as expressed, and would ask her, just for the avoidance of doubt, since the leader spoke to say that there would definitely be another Darley Park concert next year, but you yourself, as Cabinet member, cast a little doubt on that. Can you clear up the matter and promise that there will definitely be another Darley Park concert next year?
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Wood, and thank you for your concern over my own personal enjoyment of social events, which I did enjoy the Darley Park concert very much, and I'm very proud to say so. I know that the Labour leadership of Derby City Council, we are very supportive to arts and culture in the city. We think it's very important to the vibrancy of the city. However, as we are all aware, all of these events, including the Darley Park concert, are going to feed into the current budget review process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Next question, Councillor Ashburn. Do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Martin on the assembly rooms?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. How much is the Council's decision to keep the assembly rooms closed expected to cost?
Councillor Martin, you're popular again.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Ashburner. As you will probably gather from the written answer you were given, there isn't a decision to keep the assembly rooms closed. The costs of maintaining an empty building are being kept under review, and obviously they will feed into the decision-making process that we're undertaking in relation to what exactly to do with the assembly rooms.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. We come to my favourite councillor now, Councillor Kerr. Do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answers from Councillor Benwaite on council communications?
Mr Mayor, I don't know why I should be your favourite councillor, but
well,
thank you for that.
I keep calling out your name instead of Councillor Carr, so...
I do have a supplementary. The reply I have suggests that the £500 per council limit has not been reported on since the budget was centralised, which I think was probably year 12-13. So I'll be very grateful if someone could provide me with a breakdown of spending by councillor for each financial year from 12-13, so 12-13, 13-14, and well, so far this year. Is that going to be possible?
Councillor Benwaite.
Yes, Councillor Kerr, I'm sure that is possible.
Thank you very much.
But you didn't need to come here to ask that question. I mean, that's part of your role as elected member, is to ask those kind of questions, and that support is always available for you. I think just to round, just to add a bit more value to the original question you asked, is I will be circulating a report to the member steering group, and in fact I've circulated a report to the chair of the member steering group, Councillor Sarah Bolton, about clarifying the usage of member services support, particularly around around controlling the costs of mail-outs and letters. So that should all become clear. So that will go to member steering group tomorrow, and that will be made, hopefully if they approve that, that will become transparent, available to all members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benwaite. I've got to put my glasses on for this one to make sure there's an R or a double R on here. Councillor Carr, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on future waste collection?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. It's very simple. Can you then give me the target date for the operation of the new Sinfin waste plant?
Councillor Afzal.
As soon as everything is ready, I'll make sure you get a written response to that, Councillor Carr. Thank you.
I can't hear that, sorry.
I said as soon as that information is available, I'll make sure you get it in writing.
You have to go before the recycling first, like in the contract. People are supposed to throw recyclable waste into that bin now.
Thank you, Dorothy. Councillor Keith, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on community events?
I'm over here, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, I was looking for you over there. You moved.
Would the Cabinet member agree with me that the ability of neighbourhood boards in wards such as Mickleover to support and help fund community and charity events has been significantly impaired due to community funding cuts made by this administration? Therefore, will the Cabinet member reconsider Labour's policy of targeting funding and restore fair and equal funding across all wards.
Good evening, Councillor Keith. I do understand that some wards are in a worse state than other wards, and that reflects the government cuts that this authority has to deal with, and that is the reason why we're doing it. But if you guys agree to do a fair deal for Derby and we have some extra money, I'm sure all the additional wards can have all the additional budgets that they require to make sure they deal with it. But I think what we should be doing is, as local councillors and as local champions, work with the local volunteers and the local community to make sure that we get the best deal we can. But as long as the budget is being cut by the government, it's not going to be as easy as we'd all like to hope.
Thank you, Councillor Afzal. Councillor Poulter, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on public toilet provision?
I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. Councillor Afzal, your reply seems to imply that you are going to consult through the big conversation on public toilets. I would welcome a consultation, but it needs to be a specific one. The fact is that you didn't consult when you closed the spot toilets, and the fact is that it's a nonsense to suggest that the big conversation can help with this, because is it not true that a decision has been taken to close the Assembly Rooms toilet by your colleague Councillor Banwaite to save £45,000 towards your necessary budget savings?
No, I am not aware of that, Councillor Poulter, and as Councillor Martin said earlier, we have a duty, this council, to set a balanced budget, and through the big conversation it will give an opportunity to our residents to highlight what they feel their priorities are, and all things will be looked at.
You need to ask your officers, because I have...
That's enough, Councillor Poulter. Right, here we come again now. Councillor Harwood, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on fly tipping?
Yes, I have, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Afzal. In view of your reply to Councillor Keith, I think my supplementary question is very apt. In view of the considerable increase in neighbourhood board funding for the areas who have had the most fly tipping, could this extra money be used to meet the cost of clearing it up instead of buying side screens for a cricket club whose ground is not even in Derby?
I don't know how much relevance that has, but Councillor Afzal, if you want to answer him.
Good evening, Councillor Howard, and you're right, Mr Mayor, that the question that Councillor Howard is not relevant at all. And what we've got to do, where there's the greatest need in our community, within the 17 wards, that's where the priority is.
Next question, Councillor Nater, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Martin on nature reserve damage?
I do, Mr Mayor. Councillor Martin, I mean, the answer that you've given, it's not really satisfactory. You know, your answer is basically there's no current plans to do any further work on the nature reserve, as there's no budget identified. I mean, the council tore the nature reserve apart. The decision was then overturned, and I think the damage done by Derby City Council should be put right by Derby City Council. Would you agree with me?
Well, my answer is very much what was given in the written answer. That's the situation with that land at the moment is that we have not identified a budget to make that particular part of the reserve equivalent to how it was previously. However, it is under review.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Barker, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Rawson on the car boot sale?
I certainly do. Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Councillor Rawson, do you agree with me that this car boot sale is an important facility for recyclable goods and that staff issues should have been managed from the outset rather than close it down? I further note that in reply to in your written reply, it states that officers are currently in advanced negotiations with contractors. Does this mean that this Labour administration are privatising this facility?
Thank you, Councillor Barker, for your question. Yes, first of all, I absolutely do agree that the car boot sale is an extremely important facility for the city in terms of allowing people to be able to recycle unwanted goods, reducing the waste cost to the council by recycling of unwanted goods, and also in providing a facility for people who are on perhaps in the poorest circumstances to be able to access good value goods through the car boot sale. So I think we'd all absolutely agree with the value of it. As my written answer states, there have been one or two issues with in terms of staffing, and I've certainly made it a priority to try and reinstate the car boot sale as quickly as possible. And you'll see from the answer that we are hoping very much that it will be reopened by the end of September. Any use of agency staff is very much a short-term measure, and I shall certainly be looking to bring that service back in-house so that we run it as a council. So absolutely no intention of privatising that particular service. You'll be very pleased to hear, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Ashburn, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Rawson on new trees at St Peter's Cross?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. You may recall that in September 2013, 6 cypress oaks were allowed to die by Labour. Then Council Leader Paul Bailey said, "It's our duty to make sure we learn from these things." Has Councillor Rawson learned the lessons? Thank you.
Well, I have to say, Councillor Ashburn, that those particular trees were ordered and implemented by the previous Liberal Democrat and Conservative administrations as part of the capital costs of the council house. So perhaps it's other groups who need to learn the lessons rather than the Labour group. Councillor
Ashburn, I did say with that last meeting people with glass houses shouldn't throw stones, but obviously you didn't listen. Right. Councillor Kerr, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on curbside recycling?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I do. My original question asked specifically about budgets and the actions to be taken, and I think the comment here is that the impact on budgets is relatively small for the Arboretum area. But what I'd like to know is if this changes in other areas, and Mackworth I mentioned but isn't mentioned in the answer, would a decision to no longer be doing blue bin collections be taken by the Cabinet member, or would it be taken by the Ward Committee?
Good evening, Councillor Kerr. That decision would be taken by the Cabinet member. Thank you.
It's not true about contamination. Green Star.
Right. Our next question is listed as from Councillor Keith, but I understand it is from Councillor Ashburn again. Do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Rawson on St Peter's Cross refurbishment?
No, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Jolly good. Here we go again. Councillor Kerr, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Afzal on neighbourhood working?
I do. Though it might be an unfair question because it relates to
you better not ask it then.
No, because it relates to the historic data in the third paragraph of the answer. And where it refers to 3 community development officers, 1 community development manager, 1 communications officer, 1 analyst post and 1 administrator, which were not apparent to councillors at the time of area panel working. And I wanted to know whether they were actually staff working for the Community Safety Partnership but employed by the council.
Councillor Afzal,
good evening again, Councillor.
Supplementary there.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get a written response to your supplementary question. Thank you.
Our friend Councillor Ashburn, do you have a supplementary question in relation to the answer from Councillor Rawson on toilets at the spot?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yes, second toilet question. The question related to the expectations, the answer related to the intention. Is the expectation that supermarkets in Into will benefit at the expense of those in St Peter Street? The expectation, not the intention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashburner. No, the expectation is certainly exactly the opposite of what your question suggests. The point of the work at St Peter's Cross, which was extremely successful on Saturday, and if members were walking down St Peter Street on Saturday, they will have seen live music and crowds, large numbers of people stopping to listen and to take part, and likewise with the regeneration efforts at the spot. The intention and the expectation is actually to draw more people to those areas, to make them lively, to get people back into St Peter Street and that area of the city centre, so that it becomes a thriving and lively part of our city once again.
Right, thank you for the questions and answers on that particular item. Item 9 now is to consider minutes and recommendations from Cabinet meetings on 6th of August, 3rd of September, requiring approval of Council. There are two items. Does anyone wish to speak on 45/14, approval of the appointment of the Leader of the Council as representative on the Combined Authority? Okay. Does anyone wish to speak on 46/14, approval of the changes to the Treasury investment criteria? Very good. Do I have a proposal that we approve the Cabinet minutes? Is that seconded? Thank you. That's gone. Those in favour, I take it just none against. Thank you. Right. Item 10 is to consider a report of the Chief Executive on the future of the Clasp and Scape System Build Limited. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? No? Thank you. Right. There are 5 recommendations. Do I have a proposal, please? Seconded. Yeah. Those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Right. Moving on to item 11, and that is to receive a report of the Monitoring Officer on a change of appointments to the Health and Wellbeing Board. Do I have a proposer? Seconded. Those in favour?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. This is an example, and I'm not picking on Michael Garner in any way, but it's an example where we are appointing somebody to a position within the council where we are given no more than a name and sometimes we get given a position that somebody holds. It would be very useful if, in cases like this, we were actually given at least a pen sketch of somebody's background for something like this.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Councillor Kerr has said almost exactly what I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, but I did raise this.
You'll have to tell her off.
I did raise this in 2007 and was given the assurance that we would be given not necessarily a full CV, but something so that we were making a competent decision. A pen picture is ideal, certainly nothing more than the side of A4, so that we know who we are voting for. Can I envisage a time in the future when we find ourselves at an inquiry because something has gone wrong? And in all seriousness, this has happened in another authority I'm sure you can all name, where somebody might say to you, well, why did you appoint Michael Garner? And we say, well, because it was on the paper and we didn't know him, so we voted in favour. I don't know anything about him, and I'm sure he's a great guy and ideal for this post. But if we had a report with the papers saying, this is the nominee of such and such an organisation, and he is approved by these people, we would feel more confident and we could point to that, and that is why we had appointed him. We are being asked to appoint somebody we've never heard of and never seen, and that is not the sensible thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Wood and Councillor Kerr, for your comments. Yeah, Councillor Benwaite.
Councillor Kerr and Councillor Wood, thank you for your comments there and your concerns, which I do share. As the new chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, I will certainly take that forward and make sure that in future anybody new coming onto the board, you will receive that information in advance. I will also point out that both groups do have, well, all three groups do have representatives at the Health and Wellbeing Board, so that is an early opportunity to try to influence those proceedings. But I also recognise that there are many members here that clearly don't attend that, and that information should be provided to them. And that, in the interest of transparency, and make sure you're making proper, informed decisions, that information should be made available, and we'll sort that for next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benwaite. With that in mind, I take it there's nobody else. With that in mind, there are 5 recommendations. Do I have a proposal, please?
No,
second.
Okay. Yeah, so there's only the one recommendation to appoint. So we're here. So it is literally those in favour and second.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Those in favour? Any against? Well, that's done. We've now come to the item which I mentioned at the start of the meeting, the late item, which is 11A. The papers were published earlier today, in which you have before you now. Before we discuss this item, I have to ask our Chief Executive, Chief Officers and Statutory Officers to leave the chamber, please, as they could be directly affected by what we are about to discuss. As that includes our monitoring officer, the head of democratic services will assist and advise me on this item as appropriate. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading through the document this afternoon, there was just one point where one paragraph contradicts the other. It isn't clear what exactly is meant. It's in the first part that deals with the Chief Executive on 10.2 and 10.3. 10.2 basically says that any appeal of any decision come to by the Investigating and Disciplinary Committee would be appealed in full council. You then go to 10.3 and it says the Chief Executive shall have the right of appeal to appeal the Investigating and Disciplinary Committee's decision to the Council's Appeals Committee. Now I presume that that is the way it is intended, and then that the decision of the Appeals Committee would then go to Council for approval after that. It just needs clarifying. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Skelton, they're two separate things. One is an appeal against dismissal, and the other is an appeal against action short of dismissal. So they're dealt with in different ways. Does that clarify?
So we actually think that an appeal should be heard in full council with 51 members. Just seems a bit cumbersome.
Where that appeal is against dismissal, yes.
Right. Okay.
Anything less than dismissal by the panel.
Nobody else? Yeah. Right, I hope Mr. O'Brien has cleared that up for everybody. We have 10 Councillor Kerr, you seem to have made a late entry.
I'm sorry. I think he's clarified what the intention here is. I don't think what the words. I don't think the words here actually make that clear. In 10.3, we should be putting in a clause that says to an appeal short of dismissal would be going through this process, and I think we need to make, if one is dismissal, then the other one is anything short of dismissal. But I just ask members whether if, and I very much hope it is, it's not something we would have to do, but if there were a case where we were to discuss whether or not to dismiss our Chief Executive, would we actually think it was best done by the 51 of us sitting here? Or do we actually think it would be best done in some other method and for us to endorse it here? I'm not saying one is right, but I think we ought to consider that seriously.
I think the intention of this report recognises the unlikely situation and the seriousness of it at the same time, but it is for members to decide here, and if you wish to amend that, then that can be done as part of this process.
Thank you. We have 10 recommendations within the report, with 2 of them, 2.3, 2.6, requiring nominations to sit on the 2 bodies we are asked to establish. I'd like to thank the Conservative group and the Liberal Democrats for their advance notification of nominees. Do we have nominations now, please, from the Labour group, which have to be 2 separate groups of 4 with 2 cabinet members in each group?
Mr Mayor, I provided the nominations from the Labour group to Phil O'Brien.
Can I tell members what those nominations are? For the IDC, the Cabinet member nominations are Councillors Afzal and Repton, with Councillors Bolton and Eldred as the non-Cabinet members from the Labour group, making the 4. For the DAC, the Cabinet member nominations are Councillors Hussain and Shankar, with the non-executive members being Councillors Dinser and Pegg.
Thank you for resolving that element. Does anyone now wish to speak on this issue? No? Thank you. Okay. Do I have a proposal, please? Councillor Rawson, second. Those in favour? Any against? Thank you. We will now, yes, we will now allow the officers to come back. Welcome back to the offices. We go on to item 12 now, which is to consider notices of motion. And we have 3. The first is to be proposed by Councillor Benwaite and seconded by Councillor Repton. Councillor Benwaite.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is with great pride for me to report back to this full council that Derby City Council is leading a consortium of 24 local authorities from across England in a rally call to this government for powers that will enable us to introduce a levy on the profits of supermarkets. That's on the rateable value of up to of over £500,000, which will enable us then to use that money to support local communities. And can I just say, Mr Mayor, that the councils that are now rallying to our cause are cross-party councils. They're councils from the political spectrum. They're Conservative, Liberal Democrat. There's no UKIP, I'm afraid, for Councillor Graves. Yes, he will say. But this has captured the imagination of all political parties. It's not a party political issue. And we're doing what the government says in that way. The governments have introduced, through the Sustainable Communities Act, a mechanism that enables local authorities to ask for the government for changes in legislation to enable them to make improvements to local communities. Now, the powers in the past have been used for saving supermarkets, many other good examples, and the reality is the proposal we put together recognises that we are in the worst financial times for local government. We are facing the worst cuts from central government, and that we have to be innovative, we have to be creative, we have to do, in some ways, what this government is asking us to do, is to think outside the box. They've enabled us a way of doing that through the Sustainable Communities Act. And in terms of the actual proposal about a supermarket levy, I would love to say, Mr Mayor, that it was my idea, or it was our idea, or it was Councillor Bayliss's idea as a former leader, but actually the precedence has already been set by Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the levy has already proven very successful. But, Mr Mayor, in terms of putting some more flesh to the bones in terms of the benefit, I would like to read out a letter by my colleague and former leader of the council, Paul Bayliss, that was sent out as a rallying call to all council leaders across the country, and that was acknowledged eventually by 24 councils. And I'll just pick out some key parts of this very well-written letter by Councillor Bayliss. And it says, I quote, "I'm sure you agree that in these times of austerity, we all need to look for opportunities to raise additional revenue to support essential services. The power to introduce a levy of up to 8.5% on the rateable value of large retail outlets in their area with a rateable annual value not less than £500,000, and for the revenue to be retained by local authorities in order to be used to help improve their local communities. The proposal we plan to submit is for English local authorities to be given the power to introduce a similar levy in their areas and to retain the revenue to spend in ways we think would help our local communities. The levy would represent less than 1,000th of the revenues of large supermarkets. As a cost, it would be less than 30 times smaller than the VAT increase made by the government in 2011, following which the major supermarket chains embarked on a price war where they actually cut several £100 million from the prices of items on their shelves. So hopefully that will address some of the scaremongering that's been put out by those who are opposed to this, predominantly for people on the right, by people that don't support the desire to assist local communities to get through these tough financial times, by those on the right that don't believe we should be supporting independent retail traders, Mr Mayor. So, as I said, this is a cross-party campaign. It's already been supported by Conservative and Liberal Democrat councillors in many other parts of England, and I would hope, Mr Mayor, that this motion will be supported by Liberal Democrats and Conservatives of this chamber. I would also hope that our friends in UKIP would also, in this council chamber, also embrace this. We've got to do everything we can, Mr Mayor, to save our local communities from a catastrophe which is facing them as a result of these government cuts. And the worst is yet to come, Mr Mayor, as we continue to grapple with much narrowing options, and those options do continue to narrow with every year, Mr Mayor. So by introducing this levy, the extra money that we would be able to bring in, it will be clearly our opportunity to consult with communities from across the city to find out what their priorities are. So, clearly, as I've said, it could be used to keeping community facilities going, keeping public parks looking clean and tidy, to support local independent traders. Who would not want to support that? Maybe we'll find out now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benway. As you said, we'll find out. Councillor Repton.
I'd like to formally second the motion, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. Anybody else want to speak on it? Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst the motion may be in some ways a good one, I feel it will be counterproductive. Not only will it put possibly prices up, which is against what Councillor Banway wants, it will probably cost jobs, and unfortunately it may stop organisations of this kind coming into Derby, which we don't want. We want to encourage organisations to come into Derby, not only to help the city, but also with employment. I think it's very counterproductive.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Matthew Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, in regard to supermarkets, quite simply, if you take money out in taxes, you risk putting up prices, and that would hit poorer families. But actually, this is not just about supermarkets. I understand that what is being proposed is a tax on any large retailer of a specific size. It could be electrical, clothing, homeware. And that's a surefire way to drive investment away from the city when our neighbouring authorities are not proposing a levy. So let's not forget that large retail is regularly the financial anchor or viability kickstart for proposed regeneration schemes in our region and our city. And a tax on retailers could mean thousands of jobs going elsewhere that would otherwise have been available for those living in Derby. Rather than protect jobs, this plan could cost jobs. So in the press recently, Councillor Banway has said that he believed the life was being sucked out of the city centre by large warehouse-style stores. Well, actually, it's his Labour administration that is sucking the life out of the city centre. It would be far better to lobby for business rates system to be overhauled and simplified, as one example. This retailer tax, as we can call it, would merely add more complexity to that, and the Labour administration needs to be focusing its efforts, in our opinion, on supporting small to medium-sized local businesses and retailers in our city. It needs to be aggressively promoting the government's new business rates relief scheme known as Rate Relief, which provides qualifying businesses with a reduction of up to £1,000 off their business rates bill. And this is just one scheme available for local retailers and businesses to reduce business rates. The Council should also be doubling its efforts to clean up the city centre, and it should be exploring the well overdue options regarding Derby city centre markets rather than allow them both potentially to wither on the vine due to indecision. It should be ensuring, really, that a strong and robust licensing regime is in place and look to increase prosecutions in regard to the sale of illicit and counterfeit tobacco and alcohol, which is a growing black market trade in areas of Derby and is hurting law-abiding retailers. The Council should also be restoring the floral displays to make Derby an attractive place to visit and shop, and it should also be offering a fair deal to the motorist by adopting the Conservatives group's recent proposal of 1 day's free parking per month and scrapping parking charges after 6 p.m. in council-run car parks. This administration should also be opening up constructive and worthwhile dialogue with local businesses and their representatives. During the Conservatives group's discussions with local businesses, it seems clear to us that there's just not enough effort being made by Labour, if any at all, to engage, listen and act in partnership to ensure the strongest possible local economic development. And that is why this administration is failing Derby's many retailers and businesses. It should focus on supporting them and not merely lay the blame at larger retailers' doors and look to tax them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Repton, you've indicated to speak, but I don't know whether you are aware or not, but under CP 45 you are only allowed to speak once, so if you speak now you won't be able to speak at the end.
That's fine, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak now. Thank you. It's interesting that with Councillor Holmes making these suggestions about spending money that his government has taken away from this council, amounting to many, many, many tens of millions of pounds. It's your government, Councillor Holmes, that's killing cities like Derby, killing our high street. The proposals that your government have come forward have failed the high street. I believe that this proposal that we have this evening, whilst not quite revolutionary, certainly is bold, radical, exciting and progressive. And certainly it's in tune, I suspect, with the views of many, many hundreds of thousands of people here in the city and here in the Midlands. We know that supermarkets have sucked the life out of many cities throughout the Midlands and throughout this country. Yes, I understand they're a business, and that is their right to do so. But it's killed many, many small and medium-sized businesses in this city and elsewhere. This is an opportunity to address that at the margins. The amounts involved in terms of their bottom line for supermarkets is very, very small indeed. But the tens of millions that this will bring into the city will help us support the very small businesses you, Councillor Home, with your crocodile tears, say that you support. And in reality, you do nothing at all. We will put action where you only come forward with words and suggestions. That is the difference between the two of us, Councillor Home. We'll back not only hope and aspiration, but with the resources to actually do it. Let's look at these proposals. I think it's a bit similar to the living wage. We heard Councillor Holmes and Councillor Hickson say, oh, you can't introduce the living wage. The sky will fall in. Businesses will go bankrupt. Hundreds of thousands of jobs will be lost. Has that proved correct? No, it certainly hasn't. And at long last, we have a bottom line where people can't only be getting £1, £1.50 an hour. So the doom-mongers like Councillor Holmes and Councillor Hickson should not be listened to on this question. It has the support of 19 local authorities. Revolutionary cities, supposedly, like Oxford, Brighton, Preston, Southwark, Sefton, just to name a handful. Many councils of all political persuasions are supporting this. We have Bill Grimsey, who himself was the CEO, I think it was of Iceland, but certainly major companies, and he is a high street campaigner. And he is generally in favour of this proposal. He sees many merits to it. And research has shown 95% of all the money spent in large supermarkets goes out of this city. 95%. Isn't it right that we want a small amount of that coming back to this city? And let's look at what's happened in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Did the roof cave in there? No, it certainly didn't. Those communities are benefiting from it. Why on earth, Councillor Holmes, would you want to deny the people of this city benefiting from this, that supermarkets can afford, and certainly it will help the local economy? The very local economy that you say you champion, but in reality you actually do it down. We have the opportunity here to do the right thing for this city, the right thing for business, and I urge all members of this council to support this motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. We now have Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst on the face of it, this is national government motion, and it seems like a great idea, but in theory it may bring some benefits. But as Councillor Banwake knows, central government, whether it's Conservative or Labour, doesn't always carry out the sentiments that these ideas intend. Some of the issues that are cause for concern are: what will be the reaction of the supermarket chains? Businesses that are beholden to their shareholders, will they absorb these extra taxes, or will they increase the prices across their portfolio? If they absorb these costs, they will be under pressure from their ultimate bosses, the shareholders, and this could result in reducing staff numbers to make up the difference. Putting up prices is the most likely result, which means this action is counterproductive. My other concern is whether government would allow this taxation to be collected locally, or may they insist it being collected centrally in the same way business rates are collected. We may end up with just a dilution of the income amongst the rest of the country, and therefore merely add to the costs of the community instead of easing those costs. I do, however, support any initiative that tries to help local independent retailers. The number of retailers in this area has reduced drastically over the last 10 years. mainly due to the rise in large supermarkets. What is unclear in these proposals is how the Council intends to encourage a vibrant local economy in the existing district centres. The erosion in Alveston, for instance, has been enormous. I hope the completion of the improvements to the centre will help stem that decline without the increase of yet more takeaways. Maybe if we can agree a reduction in the rates, the Council could actually play its part in the rebirth of the High Street. Mr Mayor, I'm concerned that this idea would add to the cost of living, something that Labour espoused to reduce. We must not put more pressure on people when it comes to the cost of living. You have already added to that through your own brown bin tax, your increases in council tax year on year, and your increases in service charges. I have always thought it odd that in today's world you can agree an increase in charges, yet you would expect an increase in product. Year on year, you increase council tax but provide a lesser service. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Myself and Councillor Ashburner again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an important issue to be discussed rationally. It will affect the cost of living in Derby if the supermarket tax is passed on to the customer. I've therefore proposed an amendment which will essentially request of the Cost of Living Board to produce a recommendation to this body before we come to an informed decision about this. We need rational, logical decisions to be made, because if we get it wrong, we'll badly damage the economy within Derby. Thank you.
This is the motion, the amendment that's just been put forward. So would you like me to read it out while it's being distributed?
Yes.
Mr Mayor, the amendment to this motion that is proposed. Council notes the authority's leadership in promoting the introduction of a supermarket levy which would allegedly boost Derby's economy by around £2 million and help protect local services. Council also notes that 95% of the money spent in large supermarkets leaves the local economy for good, compared to 50% from local independent retailers. Council therefore requests a report into the supermarket shopper tax proposed by Derby City Council's leadership be presented to the Cost of Living Overview and Scrutiny Board, and for their conclusions to be considered by a future Council meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, we can ask her at the end. We'll go through this if she wants to speak now, because she might. I don't know whether this will get passed or not, and then she might want to speak at the end. We can just ask Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, would you like to speak?
No, that's fine. Just trying to clarify.
No.
That's fine. So we need.
Do we have a seconder for the amended version? Councillor Kerr.
Does she reserve a right to speak?
Councillor Kerr, do you wish to speak, or do you wish to reserve your right?
I'd like to second this, but reserve my right to speak later.
Yes, Councillor Banwait wants to speak on the amendment.
Okay, if there's nobody else, is Councillor Benway then?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The Labour Group will not be supporting this amendment, and let me make it clear. You could take this, certainly we'd encourage any councillor to take this to the Cost of Living Board, which this administration has set up. The cost of living is an issue which is very close to our hearts, and we'd certainly encourage you. You don't need to bring a motion to this council chamber. That is normal business. That's why we have the Cost of Living Board, and and I think it should be discussed there. And certainly, if we are in a position able to introduce this, that's a perfect place to find out how we can spend this money if we are successful in our lobbying, hopefully in our joint lobbying, because you've acknowledged, actually, you've made it absolutely clear that you've noted the fact that 95% of the money spent in large supermarkets leaves the local economy for good. You've acknowledged that, compared to 50% of local independent retailers. And you've acknowledged the benefits of the supermarket levy. But in terms of, finding ways of scrutinising this, you can do this at the cost of living board, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benway.
Councillor Skelton first.
Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all that's being asked of with this amendment is basically for more information, and that will be best done by the relevant scrutiny board. You know, we've all heard of the premise, look before you leap. We need information if we're going to make a sensible decision. And if we don't really have any information. I certainly haven't been sent any details of work that the council's undertaken on this whole question. Certainly not received any emails alerting me to this, and obviously it is an important issue, and it's only right that...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. CP 64? Okay, right. You use the phrase before you leave. You clearly, I don't know what planet you've been on the last couple of months, but just to remind you, this administration is trailblazing. We've already made a cabinet decision. You know, if your members actually turned up at the cabinet, you know what's going on.
They do.
Well, let me explain. We've already made a cabinet decision. You clearly didn't listen to what I said earlier on, that 24 councils, not 19, I think we've got those figures wrong there, but 24 councils, cross-party councils, are already supporting this. This is already at government stage now, so the proposal's already been put there. So we can't rewind the clock. The constitutional, democratic decision by this administration that has a clear mandate to make those decisions has already been made. What this is saying is, where do you stand on this? You're either for it or you're against it. That's what it's been brought to this council chamber for, so just make your mind up.
Thank you, Councillor Banwaite, for the point of order. That is the final. Councillor Skelton, that is the final word on this particular point of order.
Mr. Mayor, I hadn't actually finished saying what I wished
I'm
to say.
not talking about you finishing. I'm saying that particular point of order that was made, that is my final ruling on that. He has given an answer which I believe is appropriate.
But as is known, the only people who get sent cabinet papers are the cabinet members get copies. So it would have been nice as well to actually have included
Could we
it
let
in this
Councillor
pack.
Skelton finish, please? Thank you.
Well, maybe that was while I was on holiday.
Councillor Skelton, we're not here on a one-to-one situation. The whole council is waiting and we'd like to get on. Thank you.
But it would be nice if we did have more information within the pack. And also, because it is important that we look at things like whether supermarkets can get round this at all. It's different, say, in Scotland or in Northern Ireland, where I believe it's blanket across those countries. If one local authority area in England introduced it and then its surrounding areas did not, what effect would that have?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. CP 64, as a monitoring officer. You ask a valid question. It is very out of date, and as I mentioned earlier on, a report was taken to Cabinet.
When was it, which cabinet meeting was
Right, okay, so now we're debating whether I'm telling the truth or not, or whether it did, you know, you've been watching Dallas, haven't you? You know Dallas,
no,
you know that scene?
Watch Dallas.
You know where that scene in Bobby, you know, wakes up?
Can we have a bit of order, please? Thank you very much.
As much as I like that episode of Dallas.
Councillor Benway, look, I think all of you know in the last two meetings that I've sat here before you, there is a latitude I won't go beyond, and certainly there's no time, tonight or any other time for each of you to be sort of cross-talking or interrupting Councillor Skelton. Councillor Skelton, you have been quoted a point of order twice. It has been a cabinet decision, and if you have not read it or you wasn't furnished with it, then all I can do is apologise if it was our fault. But if it's not our fault, then there's not much help we can give you with this item. So if you could finish by sticking to what's relevant rather than trying to go over what's been decided already. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. But because we don't get the cabinet papers, it isn't necessarily that we actually see these things.
Councillor Skelton, that is not right. You are able to get cabinet papers any time you want. As I said, if it was the fault of our officers, we can only apologise. But if you chose not to see them till the next day, then that is not our problem. And you should in future seek to have a look at them as soon as possible.
Right. Well, I do look, but it must have been when I was on holiday. Must have been, because I look.
Order, please. Can we just, look, I'm not prepared to elaborate any further on this.
Right.
If you was on holiday, we'll take your word for it.
Well, it would be nice,
please get
Mr.
on?
Mayor, that if in future something is like this, we actually get a note to say, refer us to what other documents.
Mr. Mayor, can you ask her where she went on holiday and whether she had a nice time or not? I think she'd like to tell us.
I had a marvellous time,
Councillor
actually.
Repton, I'm trying to conclude this, not extend it.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. Councillor Higginbottom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a reasonable request to ask for something to go to scrutiny so that we're absolutely sure, based on facts and figures and not opinion. I don't think it's an unreasonable request, and I support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Carr.
Thank you,
Don't worry,
Mr.
Lucy,
Mayor.
I'll come to you in a bit.
It was on much the same issue. Now, there's been a lot of talk about supermarkets, and I don't have a problem with this motion and its effect on the likes of Tesco, but I am concerned because you said large retail outlets. We have a large furniture store in this city which could go down the tubes as a result of this. That's Hunters. There are other large retail outlets. Nobody's told us exactly what size and what the criteria are for going from one level to the next, and I think I would appreciate some detail too.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Anybody wants to speak before Councillor Kerr?
Is there anybody else wants to speak before Councillor Kerr summarises everything? No? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As has been stated, this is an issue that has got cross-party support in other areas, but it's clear from the debate that's gone on in this chamber that it's not something that currently has cross-party support here. And I think that's a pity. When Stephen Williams was MP, was here in Derby a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that he mentioned was that there was a need for greater creativity amongst councils to think about how we, as individually and corporately as a number of different councils, can actually look at other sources of income. And this is clearly one such source of income that can be explored, and which, according to Councillor Banwaite, we've got 24 councils across the country which are already doing. But we do need to get some sort of coherence across this council to actually look in more detail at what is being suggested and what the potential implications are. I think it's really positive and it's really strong when councillors can work together across parties. That is the function and that is the way in which overview and scrutiny is supposed to work. It's supposed to help bring together people to discuss an issue and to be able to find a way forward where there can be harmony. That is what we're proposing. Now, I very much hope that we can do that. I know that the council leader has said that in his opinion it should be pushed through regardless, because there is a Labour majority on this council and that is what he wants to do. Labour also have a majority on the scrutiny board. They could push it through the scrutiny board, but I think it would do justice to this suggestion, and I think it would be good for the way in which this council works if it would...
Point of information, point of order, CP64 again. Look, can we just get... It was not a bit of abuse. You're kind of like with the land of the fairies here. Let me give you the date that this went to Cabinet. The decision has already been made. Your opportunity, you've had plenty of opportunity. No question, I don't recall any question being asked by yourself. I don't know if you were at their meeting on the 16th of December or whether Councillor Jones asked any questions for it. And this nonsense about you don't get a report. I mean, how long have you been a councillor, Councillor Skelton? You know, I mean, I can understand Councillor Kerr getting the plot. But can I just make it clear?
Can I have a point of order on the point of order, please? CP64. You've allowed Councillor Banwick to stand several times. CP64 is actually a breach of the council rules and the procedure. He is actually having a right of reply, not a point of order.
He's setting out a point of order. This is a cabinet decision. But
Can I finish my point of order, please, Mr. Mayor?
Your debate is, your view is final, and I think we draw this to a close and move to the vote.
Yeah. Councillor Banwade, if you finish, I'd like to move this to the vote.
I'll just finish. Okay. So the point of order would, Mr. Mayor, and the monitoring officer has confirmed I have raised a valid point of order. Is this went to Cabinet on the 16th of December 2013? A comprehensive report was produced. It was taken to Cabinet. And if I just remind Councillor Kerr, she's been out for the Council for a while, how Cabinet works. We come up with a policy decision, we ask for officer advice, we take a report, and then a decision is made at this chamber. Members of the opposition are invited. The Cabinet report is circulated well in advance of that. Members of the opposition come and ask questions to that. I don't recall, I have to say, I might be incorrect there, I don't recall either yourself or Councillor Jones being here, and I don't recall it asking questions, but you have had that opportunity. So a constitutional, legal and democratic decision has been made. That's why this was on Channel 4 News, that's why this was national headlines all over one weekend, and that's why Derby's name was up there about leading this consortium of 24 councillors. Clearly the other 24 councillors, the fact that that's happened has gone amiss. The fact that there are Liberal Democrat and Conservative councillors have already taken similar reports to their cabinet. So, Mr. Mayor, I can't really understand what the confusion here is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Banwade and everybody else who's spoken on it. Can we move to the vote? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I was interrupted by that slightly fictitious CP64. So if I may continue.
Can I remind you, Councillor Kerr, you have 3 minutes to go.
2:55, it's counting down while you speak.
I'll give you an extra couple of seconds, okay.
Thank you very much. Can I point out that I am not the only councillor here in this chamber who was not a councillor in December last year. And I'm sorry, I have not gone back through all the Cabinet minutes for the 4 years when I haven't been on this council to find out what motions may have been debated and discussed at that time. Last year, I have been back as a councillor for less than 6 months.
Can we have order, please? Councillor Kerr, Councillor Kerr, I'm trying to be fair to you. We appreciate that, like a few others, that you got elected in May. I can understand that. But because you wasn't around when this was taken does not mean that we should have to reconsider again. The Liberal Democrats were represented. You are a member of the Liberal Democratic Party. They were here. So because you wasn't a councillor doesn't mean that we have to go through the whole cycle again. So I'm trying to be extremely fair to you here, but you're making it very hard for me to be so. So can you please just stick to summarise what you want to say so we can move to the vote?
Mr. Mayor, I fully appreciate that you want a decision taken on this item, but what I would like is to find a way forward where we can have cross-party agreement. And to do that, sometimes you need to be a little bit more sympathetic to those people who haven't been part of the debate before. If this motion had included in it reference to the Cabinet decision in December last year, then people would have been directed back to those papers, they could have been briefed on the situation, and they would have been briefed before this meeting. Many people in this chamber hadn't really considered the implications of this before we were briefed by Councillor Banwade when he spoke. So what I am asking is not that we remake a decision, because a decision was taken, as we've been told, by Cabinet in the previous municipal year. What I'm suggesting is that if we want to have coherence on this and uniformity and some agreement, then the way to do it is for this to go to an overview and scrutiny board so that people can consider it in greater detail and probably come to the same conclusion, but it will mean that we can do it with unanimity rather than with a growing feeling of frustration and disconnect between the parties. And this is for the benefit of Derby, because people in Derby like to see politicians being able to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Can we now move to the amendment to the motion?
So it's the vote on the amendment. Yes.
Okay. Those in favour of the amendment? Okay. Those against?
The amendment is lost.
Thank you. The amendment is lost. Can we now go back to the original motion?
Well, was Councillor Williams, I think, still wants to speak on the original motion.
Councillor Williams, I believe you indicated to speak. Do you wish to speak on this? Tally-ho.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, many of you know I represent Spondon, and in Spondon we do have a rather large store. I won't name it because that would be unfair, and I know it will not be the BBC, but however, I will stick to fairness. However, what we've done in Spondon is what I think you should all do with your neighbourhood board money, with your leadership skills, is look at setting up traders' associations. Now, this amendment, you know, you've got the right to, sorry, this is not amendment, this motion, you've got the right to bring this, but actually think further outside the box. In Spondon, we used our very limited neighbourhood funding to pump prime and start Spondon Traders Association. We worked with all the local businesses, we set up Spondon Traders, and they have gone from strength to strength. And in Spondon, we also work with the Village Improvement Committee, with the Village Regeneration Team, not just the traders. And we put on events such as Spondon Alight, which has thousands and thousands of people coming to. We put on events such as Spondon Day. We even have our own currency, the Spondoolie. Okay? You need to think outside of the box. This Spondoolie, you can buy it for 90p, and it's worth £1 in all of our traders' shops. And the traders get people coming in and using their businesses. It's fantastic. Now, we're not the only ones that do these sort of things. For example, in Mickleover, they work really hard with their community and have great days out. And the village is absolutely streaming, and all the local businesses, they absolutely benefit from it. And it's about promoting local businesses to shop in your local village, to make sure your kids know what's going on. You can get everything you want in Spondon, and we promote that actively. And so I would encourage you all to do that. It's not hard to work with your local businesses to set up a traders association, and once they're up and running, they're self-financing, they help you put on local community events. You can come to it like the mayors have done and the deputy mayor's done. Deputy mayor came to Spondon this year. Spondon's Got Talent, didn't you, sir? Oh, yeah. Absolutely fantastic day it was, you know, and this is all put on because we work together with our traders, and we make sure that Spondon traders and the Spondon village gets priority. Now, we would never say no to those big companies that are in our ward, because they do employ a large number of people from our village and from wider. But they also do good in the village. They do litter sweeps, although I'm sure they have to now get trained to do that by the council. They also do extra funding, where they give money to the community, including to local businesses. They do all sorts of good things in the community, so I would not want to discourage them. I wouldn't like them to leave because we've taxed them. That's just idiotic. So come on, use your brains. Work with your local traders, set up a traders association if you haven't done it already. Be bold. Don't bring silly things like this to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Perhaps I or the next mayor may want to come and open the first currency exchange in Spondon for the Spondoonie. I look forward to that. Thank you. Councillor Hickson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're making a real meal out of this motion where we don't need to make one. The issue is that this is a Labour initiative, and they brought it forward. It certainly did come to Cabinet, because I was there when it was discussed. And we all get the Cabinet papers. And the matter is a fundamental one of a difference of approach. The Conservative group don't agree with the supermarket levy for all of the reasons that Councillor Holmes said, and the Labour group do. It's as simple as that, and they're entitled to bring this motion. We've heard, I don't know what Councillor Kerr or Councillor Skelton were talking about in terms of moving the amendment. Having Councillor Kerr back in this chamber, she's a bit like a cold sore councillor. Once you've got one, you know it's going to go away in time, but unfortunately they always come back. And that's what's happened as far as Councillor Kerr is concerned.
Councillor Hickson, remember the latitude I said, you know.
And I do think that if members are going to move amendments in this chamber, that they should at least do other members the courtesy of researching the issue first and talking with some semblance of knowledge about the issue that's currently under discussion by the council, not rabbit on about nonsense, and then claim that you're on holiday when the Cabinet item was discussed. It beggars belief. that councillors with the experience of Councillor Skelton and Councillor Kerr are coming forward with this nonsense and then saying, when challenged quite legitimately, that it went to Cabinet and a decision was made. Well, I must have been on holiday at the time. I mean, it's bordering on the ridiculous. The issue is, as far as supermarket levies are concerned, is that they will do nothing to add any value to the city. They will hit those hardest able to purchase items by adding costs, and will probably drive out businesses from the city. There is a fundamental difference of view between the Labour group and between this Conservative group. We don't agree with the supermarket levy. As far as this supermarket levy is concerned, it doesn't matter whether we deal with this motion tonight. Certainly there's no point in sending it to overview and scrutiny. What are they going to add to the party that's not already been discussed here and elsewhere? And you must have been living on another planet not to have known that this issue was under discussion. It had widespread media coverage, it was in the papers, and a range of different politicians gave their view about it. My view, for what it's worth, is that this horse is well and truly dead, and it's well and truly flogged. The ministers have said they're not going to do it. It's not going anywhere. It's a piece of nonsense as far as the Labour group is concerned. They want to make the point in this chamber. They're entitled to do that. But it ain't going anywhere, and it's never going to happen. So let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor Hickson. I agree with you that we've made a mountain out of a molehill, and I'm not going to take any further on sort of speakers on this. I'd like to move it to the vote, please.
Well, he can sum up if he wants. Councillor Banwight's entitled to sum up if he wants.
You mean there's more left to say on this yet? Yes.
Absolutely right, Mr Mayor. Can we make it clear? This is Councillor Hickson. I'm grateful for clarifying the Conservative group's position, but it is the position of the Conservative group in Derby. It's not the position of Conservative councils amongst the 24 councils that are supporting this. It's also not the position of many Liberal Democrat councils who are already supporting this. We do have a duty of responsibility, and we are working in a cross-party way, so Councillor Kerr, hopefully that reassures you. And we've got a responsibility now that we are leading the charge, that we honour the pledge we've made to Conservative councillors, Liberal Democrat councillors of the 24 councils in support of this, that we continue to press for this. They clearly recognise this is a need. This is not about Derby, this is about a national issue. And the fact is, we are leading a consortium of 24 cross-party councillors. So if the Conservative group here don't understand that, there are Conservative councillors across the country that are supporting us. So I think that's only right that we continue the charge. Now, in terms of the government minister that spoke on it, if you think about it, he predetermined the decision without it taking due process. So I think he's actually potentially breached the rules there without seeking advice. There is a mechanism, and that's the Sustainable Communities Act. This proposal has been put to government, and they have not formally made a decision about it yet. So I think we need to wait until we get that decision. But there's a long journey still ahead of us, and that includes working with the local government association. They seem to be very supportive of this. And I'm very proud to say also, Mr Mayor, that the National Asian Business Association, which represents business leaders, small businesses across the country, is wanting to hold an event in this very council chamber. And we're in the process of facilitating that. So their representatives will be coming to Derby, and they'll be encouraging small business representatives from across England to come to Derby. So Derby will be actually hosting that event. And we're just waiting on final confirmation of that. So again, I encourage anybody in the council chamber to come along to that. But can I also deal with the nonsense from Councillor Holmes about jobs? Well, he supports a government where unemployment has gone up, poverty has gone up. And in terms of jobs, well, again, I think he's been with the land. Clearly, he must be on the same planet as Councillor Hickson alleges Councillor Kerr must have been, because we brought 1,200 jobs through Webhelp, and that was a cabinet report. That will eventually lead to a further 650, and through Affinity Park, we will be looking to bring in 4,500 jobs over 10 years. And that's happened under this Labour administration, Mr Mayor. So we're not going to take any lectures from Councillor Holmes. Again, I wish he'd recall some of the reports that he's supposed to have read. So, Mr Mayor, this is a journey we're on, and we brought it to this council chamber to say this is the position of this Labour group. I think the people out there, the public, the electorate, the small businesses in Derby, want to know where you stand on this. The Liberal Democrats, wishy-washy as ever, are sitting on the offence.
Well, we know what happens when you sit on the fence. You get your, you get your bottom spiked. So hopefully I haven't spoken out of turn there. The Conservative group in Derby have made their position clear. So, Mr Mayor, I think we now should move on to the vote, and I would like it to be a recorded vote from the Labour group, Mr Mayor, and I think we need to stand. So I'll be moving that we move to the vote, and it is a recorded vote.
Mr Mayor, under CP 64 point of order. Actually, the jobless figures are down, as Councillor Banwaite should know. It's fallen, and it's now at the lowest level since 2008. Thank you.
We need 10 members to support the recorded vote. Oh, which? 2, 3. We've got the 10, that's fine. Yep.
I said that was rather preemptive of you. I didn't even ask you to stand then. Right. Yes. Seeing as we've already had 10 people stand up to say yes, we want a recorded vote, we'll have one.
Would members please indicate when I call their name if they wish to vote for or against the motion? Councillor Afzal.
For.
Councillor Ashburner. Councillor Banwaite.
For, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Councillor Bolton. Councillor Campbell.
For.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dinser.
For.
Councillor Eldred. Councillor Graves.
For.
Councillor Harwood. Councillor Hazelgrave.
For.
Councillor Hickson. Councillor Higginbottom.
For.
Councillor Hillier. Not here, is she? Councillor Alison Holmes. Councillor Matthew Holmes. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Ingle. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jennings. Councillor Keith. Councillor Jangir Khan. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Nater. Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Pegg. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Redfern. Councillor Repton. Councillor Russell. Councillor Sandhu. Councillor Shankar. Councillor Skelton. Councillor Stanton. Councillor Titley. Councillor Troop. Councillor Turner. Councillor Webb. Councillor Whitby. Councillor Williams. Councillor Wood. Councillor Wright. And Mr Mayor, Councillor Khan.
For.
For the motion 29, against the motion 6, abstentions 12. The motion is carried. Apologies, against 12, abstentions 6.
Thank you very much. Can anybody tell me what day it is? It took so long to get over that motion.
The second motion.
Yeah. Okay, I got it here. Right. Our second motion for debate will be proposed by Councillor Graves and seconded by Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope we don't get any more spurious points of order under CP 64. It has been said before, but we are in unprecedented times. Austerity has been with us for many years now, and the effects on council budgets have been enormous. I am sure one side will blame the other, and vice versa, for the reasoning behind the difficult situation the country finds itself in. This does no good for the everyday person on the street. The facts are clear. Services are under a great deal of strain, and savings need to be found wherever they can be found. The number of councillors in our council has not changed, despite the number of council staff being reduced by over a third. The reduction in staffing levels has undoubtedly affected critical services the Council has to provide. The personal effect is devastating on those staff who, through no fault of their own, have been forcibly made redundant. Don't for one moment think that the Council staff are not aware that councillors have made no sacrifices during these times. To reduce the number of councillors by a similar percentage as Council staff would seem an appropriate action in view of the circumstances. I appreciate that some councillors will play the "who will do the work" card, but quite frankly this does not wash. When you cut the budgets of essential services, you never once said, "who will do the work?" You just told them to get on with it. Well, I'm sure those dedicated councillors that are left would rise to the challenge. And like the staff, we could find better ways of working. Earlier this year, the majority of councillors rejected the idea of removing special responsibility allowances, leaving a bad taste in the mouths of Derby residents. As you know, this would have saved £135,000 per year, every year. Money that could have been used towards those essential services that councillors on the opposite bench so admirably defend. But never mind, that was not to be. This motion could save even more, at least £250,000 every year. This could be allocated to some of those essential services that UKIP want to save. You'll be aware of those devastating cuts to voluntary groups, providing vital services to the most vulnerable in our society. You'll be aware of swinging cuts to social services, again affecting elderly members of our community who have paid into our welfare system all their life, only to find the cupboard is bare when they need it. Vulnerable children, and with our recent history, we need to be very sure that we protect them fully. I know there are plans to close a facility in Leopold Street for our looked after children. I would like to think that this motion would help save that facility. That, by the way, contradicts something Councillor Hussain said earlier in answer to a question. I think it's appalling that the Council is considering closing such a vital facility. Mr Mayor, if this motion is accepted, it will show a clear affinity with our communities at a time when they are struggling, just like the Council is struggling. Acceptance of this motion would show that we are all in touch with the reality of the austerity this country is going through. It will show that we care about the people in our society, and we care about Derby. I move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor Higginbottom.
Formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak, please, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Benway, you've indicated to speak.
Yes, Mr Mayor, the Labour Group would like to move an amendment.
Councillor Hickson, you indicated to speak. It seems there's not much on telly tonight. We've got 2 amendments to this. Yes.
Mr Mayor, while this amendment is being circulated, Councillor Banwaite is proposing the deletion of wording and the insertion of alternative wording. However, if those amendments are agreed, the amendment as reworded would read as follows. Council recognises the effects of the austerity measures imposed from central government and how this negatively affects the residents of Derby, council staff and severe pressures on budgets. So far, we have seen increases in council tax whilst cutting services and staff numbers. Council calls on Leader of the Council to reaffirm to Government the desperate situation being imposed on this city. Council also calls on all councillors to take inspiration from the Bombardier campaign and give their backing to a Fair Deal for Derby campaign to demand that this year's local government settlement does not disproportionately impact on our city as it has in the past.
Mr Mayor, can I speak? I feel that this amendment actually alters the meaning of the amendment completely. In fact, it reverses the meaning of the amendment, which amendments aren't supposed to do within this council.
Councillor Graves, if that is contravening things, I'm sure our legal officers will tell us.
if I may, this amendment proposed by Councillor Banwaite does recognise the need for cuts. I accept that it does take away slightly from what Councillor Graves is indicating about the reduction in councillors. However, the overall issue of the cuts is there, and I'm satisfied that this is a suitable amendment to be considered by Council this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Banwaite, would you like to speak on the amendment?
I wish the monitor officer wouldn't make me sweat like that. We did check it out, but we changed the wording just at the last 5 minutes before full council. That's why I was slightly late. So, yeah. Well, Councillor Graves, we are in agreement, actually, that the premise of your motion is correct. That austerity is having a devastating effect on, on our council, on our city, in fact, the country. I think we've, found ourselves on agreement there, but we don't agree with your solution. So, how does it help cutting councillors, attacking the democratic process? And I know that's not your intention, and I won't assume it is, but that's how it can come across. There are people in this world that are fighting and dying for the vote to elect people. There are countries that don't have elected members, and finding ourselves in a position of cutting them to make and it's not going to balance the budget. And what I'd be interested to know from yourself and Councillor Higginbottom is your plan for finding you said about £250,000, but we've got £81 million cuts to make over 3 years. You're not coming forward with proper solutions about that. I'd certainly welcome plans from you, Councillor Higginbottom, carefully presented plans, costed plans of how you would save this authority £81 million. So you could have those put forward, let's say, I'll leave it to you, hopefully over the next couple of months, and from yourself, Councillor Graves. That would be a far productive. And the best way to do that is by working through the big conversation. We have set up a budget simulator, and the question I would ask you, have you completed that budget simulator? Councillor Higginbottom, have you completed the budget simulator? That's the question I would ask you. That is a clear opportunity for you to sit with your community, your family, or maybe your party colleagues. Councillor Higginbottom, you could clearly sit with your friends and see how you would make the budget balance. So, Mr Mayor, we don't agree with the solution, but I come back to this thing. If it comes to the point, where we are actually attacking the very foundations of democracy in our country, that is a retrograde step. And if history shows that civilised countries, civilised democracies that take that step, you just need to look at, just before the war, that countries did that. Democracy, we should cherish it. We should protect it, not try to take it away. So the solution is undemocratic. Now, coming back to the motion as amendment, it is about fair deal for Derby. And I know when this Labour administration embarked on Fair Deal for Derby a couple of years ago, that having originally received cross-party support, we weren't able to sustain it because, I recognise that the campaign was a very political campaign. We felt it was right at the time, but I'm fully prepared to get round the table with Councillor Hickson, with Councillor Jones, with Councillor Graves, of how we can create a strategy that would, they would feel satisfied with. So I'm open to suggestions in regards to that. We've got to do everything we can to work together to fight for a fair deal for Derby. And in the past, Councillor Hickson's group has acknowledged that, Councillor Jones's group has acknowledged that. And I have to say, Councillor Graves, at a cabinet meeting, I did put out the olive branch, and you accepted it. I read with interest your comments in the Derby Evening Telegraph that you would support a Fair Deal for Derby campaign. I would also hope that if we could, through our successful lobbying, secure a fair deal for Derby, that we wouldn't find the need to cut out the democratic process in this council. So, Mr Mayor, that's our motion. It is about fair deal for Derby. I want to put aside our political differences in the interest of the city, and I want to put behind us the episode, the unfortunate episode that led to the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats leaving the Fair Deal for Derby campaign. So let's put that behind us. Let's call this Fair Deal for Derby the new Fair Deal for Derby, a Fair Deal for Derby campaign that would be acceptable to the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats and UKIP. So I would be happy to arrange a meeting
So I will contact, I'll speak to Jackie Waring after or tomorrow and ask her to contact the group leaders to a meeting so we can progress a Fair Deal for Derby campaign. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We need a second. Who's a seconder? Yeah, he needs just a seconder.
Councillor Benway, we appear to have lost the name of the seconder on this amendment.
Oh, it's Councillor Schenker.
Councillor Schenker, would you care to speak or reserve your right? Jolly good of you. Anybody else wishes to speak on this? No? No? Okay, then we move to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? The amendment is carried. Councillor Hickson, would you like to put your amendment forward or...
It's an amendment to now the new motion. Yeah.
So, yeah. We're having an amendment to the amendment. So this is from Councillor Hickson.
Yes. Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify, the amendment proposed by Councillor Banwaite is now the substantive motion that is now subject to an amendment proposed by Councillor Hickson. Councillor Hickson, if I may just read out your proposed amendment.
Just for clarification, Mr Mayor, the amendment will substitute the words of the now amended substantive motion and replace them with these words.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, would you wish me to read this out?
Yes, please.
The amendment proposed by Councillor Hickson reads as follows. The public are entitled to the reassurance that the current system of 51 councillors for Derby City is both fit for purpose and value for money to the local taxpayer. This is particularly pertinent as it is some time since the current system was implemented and in view of the fact that there has been significant change in the financial landscape since the issue was last considered. Council therefore recommends that the issue of the numbers of members be considered in detail by the appropriate Overview and Scrutiny Commission, taking a wide range of views both inside and outside the Council, and that following that review, recommendations be made to invite the Boundary Commission to initiate a formal review that should be deemed necessary. Sorry, yes, it does read should be deemed necessary. Thank you.
Councillor Hickson.
Well, the purpose of moving my amendment, Mr Mayor, was to be conciliatory, really, in terms of the original proposal by Councillor Graves, which I understand the sentiment of, but which was completely flawed. And he should understand why it was flawed, because I think he was here when the Boundary Commission last did a review of the number of members that sit on this council. This isn't an issue which this council can make a decision on. It's not within our remit. We can't decide how many members there are going to be. I don't know whether his original motion's got any merit or not. But I think, you know, it ill behoves members to come to this council and move motions in the way that Councillor Graves has done, which are almost scribbled on the back of a fag packet, when it's an issue that is so serious. He knows that this council can't make the decision. And I suspect, therefore, the reason for moving the motion was more to get a cheap headline rather than to contribute to the effective running of this council. Now, I don't know, and I suspect nobody in this council chamber knows, whether 51 members is the right number, whether 34 members is the right number, whether 60 members is the right number. That isn't our business, and it isn't a decision that we are ever called upon to adjudicate on. That power isn't with us. It lies properly elsewhere with adjudicating authorities in central government who make an assessment about how the work of this council pans out and how it should be discharged on behalf of local taxpayers and local voters. I think that the public, as my amendment says, are entitled to the reassurance that the current system of 51 is fit for purpose. I don't see any harm in that. And I think that the Overview and Scrutiny Commission is the right place for that evidence gathering to take place, where we can have views from the party leaders and we can have views from outside bodies about what they think about the current governance arrangements of this council. And if there is a case, then that Overview and Scrutiny Commission can then send it on to the appropriate government department, which in this case would be the Electoral Commission, saying, well, the Overview and Scrutiny Commission of Derby City Council have had a good look at this, and they think that there is a case, if that's what they did think, and invite them then in to make a formal review. That's the way it should work, not to just cobble up something that you think is going to get a headline in the press because you think it's going to curry favour with the public, irrespective of the consequences it might have on them and the service that they receive from this council. So that's why I've written the amendment in the way that I have. I don't agree with the amendment made by Councillor Banwaite. You wouldn't be surprised for me to say that. And I think that Councillor Banwaite, I understand why he's written his amendment in the way that he has, because he wants to drag in Fair Deal, which is dead as far as we're concerned, and he wants to drag in all sorts of other issues. But I would rather, and I would ask the Labour group to consider this carefully, I would rather that we continued with the issue that was raised with Councillor Graves, misguided though it was, and that we follow that through to its ultimate conclusion. My view is that there is no substance and no case in what Councillor Graves proposes. That's only my view, so I can't be wrong, can I? But that might not be the view that Overview and Scrutiny reach, and it certainly might not be the view that the Boundary Commission reach. And, of course, Councillor Graves, you have to be careful about what you wish for in this world, because it may well be, bearing in mind the current workloads of members of this council, that if it did go to the Electoral Commission, they might come back and say this council requires 61 councillors or 71 councillors, because there is certainly a case in some wards where 3 councillors can't manage the workload. I don't know where that might end, but certainly it isn't a decision that this council could make this evening. So I would encourage the Labour group to consider carefully the words that I've put down in the amendment and see whether that represents a fairer way forward, so that we can explain to the public, look, this proposal was put to the council. We don't know whether it's got any merit or not, but we are prepared to have a look at it in some detail through the mechanisms that we've got. And if there is a further case, then we'll send that on. I don't know what the answer to that might be, but I think that's a much more explainable position to the public with respect than the one that Councillor Banwaite's put forward, which rather looks as though it's tit-for-tatting on terms of, I don't want to particularly aggravate Councillor Banwaite, because I want him to go along with the words that I'm proposing, but it rather comes over in that way, and I think the public would understand it better if we said, look, this proposal has been put forward, it's flawed, we're not saying whether there is any merit in it or not, we don't know, the final decision isn't ours, but we are prepared to let it go through the mechanisms and see whether it is.
Thank you, Councillor Hickson. For the second time of the night, I agree with you that we should be careful what we wish for. However, setting that aside, we don't appear to have a seconder for this yet.
Mr Mayor, I second the amendment and reserve my right to speak.
Jolly good of you. Councillor Banwaite.
Mr Mayor, the Labour Group can't support this amendment, but we support the advice provided by Councillor Hickson. Councillor Hickson's been a councillor here for a long time. He's clearly knows his stuff. He's absolutely correct in his assertion about the role of the Boundary Commission. The setting of the number of councillors in councils is not a matter for councils. That's a matter for the Boundary Commission. And in fact, I think I'm correct in saying actually at one time this local authority had 64 councillors. So, be careful what you wish for. You could find it going up, and then you'll find yourself in a bit of tricky water, because you'll have the Boundary Commission giving you all sorts of reasons why there should be more councillors. And there will be some will be around devolution. All governments are talking about devolution. You just need to watch the news of what's happening in Scotland. Who knows, we might declare independence ourselves in Derby. But clearly, devolution, I'm not... There's no plans there, Councillor Holmes, don't worry. Not the Independent Republic of Derby, But look, on a serious note, the workload of, as Councillor Hickson said, is quite substantial, and tough times. Well, we've got. If you think about it, we are councillors at the worst time in local government. We've got to find £81 million worth of savings cuts. That's a huge job to do. It's not an easy job to do. And that requires, that's a very pressured job, it's a very stressful thing to do, and the consequences of those decisions will reverberate not just in this council chamber, but in the city for generations to come. So we've got to get it right. And I come back to this point about us working together to do that, and that's why we've launched the big conversation.
But I come back to the premise. I agree with your premise. You know, when you've introduced this motion, Councillor Graves, you clearly I agree with you that it's about austerity. You know, austerity is tough on this city, it's tough on our budgets, and you've presented a solution. As I said, I would welcome other solutions. I just don't agree with this solution for the reasons that Councillor Hickson has rightly commented on. So it is about fair deal for Derby. Now, I would urge Councillor Hickson, just as he doesn't want to necessarily antagonise me, and I don't want to antagonise him, I've got the greatest respect for him. He was council leader at one of the most successful campaigns that this city has run in response to the Bombardier issue. And and Councillor Hickson put a rallying call out. Councillor Bayliss was the leader of the Labour group at the time, and we acknowledged that. You know, we went round the table. It was an easy thing to do. We disagreed on a lot of things, especially around the politics. But we put our party differences aside, Councillor Hickson. And we are now doing that again. And to simply say it's a dead issue, how can that be the case? We've got £81 million cuts to come to council budget. This council, unless it can get through that process, is facing a very, very bleak future. Children's, people's futures potentially could be at stake. The future of council services certainly are. That's the gravity of what we're facing. To not simply want to get around the table with us, even to hear how we could run a fair deal for Derby campaign. You haven't even heard how we want to approach it. It is about lobbying this government. And can I say this now? It's also about lobbying a future Labour government. We should be lobbying all national politicians, because our loyalties, and I have to say this now, and it might cause me leaving the Labour Party, but my loyalty is not to Ed Miliband, it's not to the Labour Party. It's to my socialist values, you know, which existed long before these people were around, and it's to my city of Derby, where I was born and bred. That's where my loyalties lie. So, Councillor Hickson, Councillor Jones is not here today, I accept that, but Councillor Kerr as deputy, and Councillor Graves, I think this is a golden opportunity for us to work together. So all I would say is let's just sit down together, you know, over a cup of tea, over a cup of coffee, you know, a glass of water, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the things that drove a wedge between us, and let's put our party political differences aside. I said I'm all open to suggestions, Councillor Hickson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benway. I can assure everybody here that there won't be any talk of devolution, and there certainly won't be a motion for independence, not while I'm here. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I think the last speech we heard was drifted quite a long way from the amendment that we have in front of us. But I'm coming back to this amendment, and I'm asking that if this is being considered, if this is supported, and I hope that it will be supported, and we are discussing this in whichever relevant Ovian Scrutiny Board, I think it's an opportunity to look slightly beyond the number of councillors. There are a number of issues which I think are also relevant. Number one is our city boundaries. We've already heard reference tonight as to the challenge that we have in terms of being built up to our city boundaries and how we are trying to achieve additional housing numbers in a very difficult situation. So if we're going to be looking at local government issues for our council, I think we should also be able to talk about whether we want to have a review and to invite a review to say whether or not the city's boundaries are currently correct or whether they ought to be reviewed. That would obviously be something which the Boundary Commission would have within its remit, but we could ask them to do that. Secondly, I think we need to look at whether the level of financial and staff support that we are currently getting through our neighbourhood system is appropriate. One thing that I felt from comparing now with 4 years ago when I was previously a councillor is that we have a lot more in terms of ward staff support now than we did 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when we had area panels, we didn't have staff at our beck and call the whole time in our neighbourhoods. And as a councillor, more was expected of us in terms of dealing with the public and sorting out the problems that we had and we were presented with from our electorate. It's very easy now, I think, to sit back and say, neighbourhood officer, please deal with this. Neighbourhood officer, please deal with this. Neighbourhood officer, please deal with this. It's not my way, and it's not the Liberal Democrat way. But it may be the way that other people feel they have to do to be able to get their casework covered. And finally, if we're going to be talking about the democracy within our city, and I think that's a very valid thing for us to be doing as a body of elected people, I think we can also query whether or not we have the right electoral system. In Scotland, councillors are elected through a different system which gives more power to the electorate through a single transferable vote. And that has been working well, and I think it's the third thing which I would like an Overview and Scrutiny Commission to look at. So those three things are our voting system, our city boundaries and our level of neighbourhood support. We don't have control over two of those.
Councillor Barker, you wish to put a point of order?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, point of order on CP64. I've learnt this one from the leader. The councillor has been given information here, and it seems to me that she's put two further motions or amendments to the motion, or amendments to the amendments to the amendments. Can somebody clarify this, because she's bringing whole new issues into this?
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Kerr, I don't think we could sort of make it any more clearer. We have had one amendment that's been passed. This is another amendment from Councillor Hickson, the Conservative group. If you wish to speak on this, then please do so, but not on the previous one or a new one. Unless you've got a new one, I don't mind taking it, because we seem to be in the mood for an amendment, so we'll stop here till 10. But if you haven't, then can we please stick to the one that's been presented to us by Councillor Hickson?
The proposal we have in front of us is for Overview and Scrutiny to look at the way in which we are dealing with councillors in this city. And if we're going to be looking at the method of us looking at our councillors and the role that councillors have within the city, and we are going to be communicating with the Boundary Commission, then the other things I've said are both related to our democracy within the city and relating to the Boundary Commission. And I was asking that our Overview and Scrutiny Commission that is being asked to do this work should also look at those closely related other items as part of their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm glad that the motion has actually sparked debate throughout the Chamber. I think it is an important issue. I would like to address some concerns. Unfortunately, Councillor Hickson, I don't believe that cheap political point scoring is very helpful within this chamber. It doesn't do anybody any good. As far as cheap headlines are concerned, this is something that UKIP campaigned on in the last election. We didn't bring it to Council beforehand. It didn't come as a question beforehand. It is something that we promised the people that voted for us, and this is exactly what we're doing. Having said that, your amendment, Councillor Hickson, is valid and of good, credible motion. Unfortunately, where I disagree is that you can actually express to the Boundary Commission what your views are. If your views are that you wish to reduce the number of councillors on this authority, you can actually do that. And for you to say, and for anybody to say that the councillors are overworked in this council chamber is in my opinion, wrong. There are many councillors in this authority that do very little, and people see that every day. Councillor Banwaite talked about attacking democracy. No, it isn't attacking democracy at all, Councillor Banwaite. I am not saying that we should stop people voting. That is attacking democracy, because you can still vote for people. What I'm suggesting is that maybe, if those people that look at it, the Boundary Commission, maybe they'll say, we only need 2 councillors per ward. All right? That doesn't mean the ward is unrepresented. It doesn't mean that people can't vote. I actually think that the way that the motion has been altered shows lack of empathy with the residents of Derby. And I find it very difficult, Councillor Banwaite, when you talk about saving £81 million. Yes, we know you've got to save £81 million. Everybody knows it. My motion was actually showing how you could save some of it. I'm not saying you could save all of it, but you could save some of it. What you've done is disregard that completely. So you don't even want to save that £250,000. On top of that, you've ordered a PA at £41,000. You've ordered a researcher at £27,000. So that's another £68,000 that you've added to the authority's costs. And it's very interesting that one of those people... And it's very interesting that one of those people...
Councillor Graves, I'll say the same thing to you that I did to Councillor Kerr. Can you stick to the amendment?
It is.
No,
I am
it is
sticking
not.
with the amendment. It's
You're
about
quoting,
the costs.
You're quoting
it's about
figures
the costs.
that have already gone through.
It's
Councillor Hickson has put an amendment forward. I'd like you to address that.
I am addressing that, Mr Mayor. It's about the costs that this council operate through. And also, you want a researcher. You have 2 researchers in your cabinet that work for Chris Williamson. You yourself are a part-time leader. When are you going to dedicate the full time that you should do to this authority?
Great. I have said this in the past 2 previous meetings, and this is the final time I'm going to say it. I will not accept this type of behaviour. You know, and everybody else knows by nature I'm a fair person, but you know, you're driving me to the very, very limit, and I don't particularly want to come down hard on you because then you'll be saying I'm picking on you. But you're a very experienced councillor. Why do you take this to these levels? Right? There's absolutely no need for it to come down on private disparity or anything else. Right? You have a motion in front of you. Speak on, amendment, speak on that. Otherwise, I will ask you not to speak. Simple as that. Because I don't want to prolong this any further than is necessary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And unfortunately, everybody in this chamber does know that you tried to pick on me. I won't allow that to happen, but I'll continue. To alter this motion, Mr Mayor, actually shows contempt to our taxpayers, to our voters, to the vulnerable, to our families, to our children, to the elderly and to the homeless. If you really believe you are selfless councillors, you would have accepted the original motion. I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dinser, I sincerely hope you stick to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for that warning. The amended motion from Councillor Hickson, I think I sort of supported that up to a point. He made a very valid point that any decisions about constitutional representation of local authorities is in the power of the Boundaries Commission. And we know on many occasions the Boundary Commission have reviewed local authorities, including ourselves in the past, and when they do, we have to take on board and make representation of them and go abide by what they have to do. Councillor Hickson started off very well by talking about that this council does not have the power to make decisions or recommendations, and therefore I thought that's a good starting point. However, then he says that we should actually refer it to the Scrutiny Commission to actually do a review. In my view, that contradicts the first statement that Councillor Hickson made, which is inappropriate. If it's inappropriate for the Executive to put forward through the full Council decisions about Boundary Commission when it's not within our remit, it's even more inappropriate for the Scrutiny Commissions to do that as well. So I actually want to support the original motion put forward by Councillor Banwaite, which is the amendment talks to, and that is that we have a duty to make sure that we have good, fair representation, democratic representation, whilst many others are fighting for democracy all over the world. And we don't want to undermine that. Now, we did have a situation when there were 64 councillors representing the City of Derby, when there was a county and a city council. That went down to the 51 that we have now, and that was a democratic deficit then, and many people were very unhappy and disagreed with that. But it was a decision made through the Boundaries Commission, not by this council, not by anybody else. Any further reduction in this, I think, would be inappropriate, and it takes the focus on what the issues are. The issues are, we are in austerity. We went through this before under the Thatcher government, and at that time nobody talked about reducing democratic representation, and we made massive swingeing cuts. And Councillor Graves would, I'm sure, remember those. I don't think I remember him coming in front of council and us as a councillor to say, let's cut back our council representation at the time. So therefore, I think the focus here is about what do we want to do together to actually make representations about austerity, about the unfair cuts. We all agree, I agree, that we have to have reductions in times of austerity. But the issue that Councillor Banwaite highlights is about the issue about whether this city is getting a fair representation and a fair allocation of funds as it stands. We know we're not. And this chamber, from all parties at one point, agreed on that, as Councillor Banwaite said. We really want to join together to see that we get a fair deal for Derby. And I think I would still support Councillor Banwaite's invitation to all the parties represented in this chamber to join together, to talk to the government, to say, look, give us a fair deal, give us a fair chance, not about ignoring austerity and cuts, but actually look to be fair. That's all we're asking, and I think it would be a really great thing if all of us joined together to do that. And the motion has put forward, amended by Councillor Banwaite, which is a substantive motion, is in that spirit and in that intent. Please, all of us join together to do that. Fight for the city of Derby, for the citizens of Derby, for a fair deal for Derby.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are only a couple of points I want to make as to the amendment. I think a lot of this, as per the original motion, speaks to whether we're employees or we're representatives. And either we're employees of the council or we're people who represent the people who elected us, and we're here to hold the council to account and make sure our residents get access to those services. I happen to think we're the latter, not the former, and therefore some blanket cut in democracy actually reduce the access to democratic, legitimate, holding this council to account, as should happen, and is even more important given the circumstances that we're in at the moment and the difficult decisions that are going to have to be made. So I actually think people want more access to democratic recourse to those decisions being made. Now, the idea that there's less work to do or we can somehow do more, I think speaks a little bit to this amendment. The way I see it, and I'm only a first-term councillor, there are three sides to the work we do. There's the Punch and Judy show in here, in the constitutional side. There's the casework, the everyday stuff, the stuff that really makes a difference in the streets we do. And then there's the holding our council to account through overview and scrutiny. As Councillor Hickson refers to, that we could send this to overview and scrutiny. However, we know that Councillor Graves and UKIP boycott the scrutiny boards, don't take part. So of course they can cut 1/3 of the council, because they don't do 1/3 of the work. Okay? And it's very interesting to find out that Councillor Graves agrees with Councillor Hickson that this should go to a committee he wants nothing to do with, that he thinks makes no sense, and he boycotts. I mean, I would love to reduce UKIP in this chamber to by a third, but that's beside the point. And the other point is, there's loads of work for us to do out there, increasingly so. Get on the doorsteps, go and find it, do walkabout, listen in your surgeries. Thank you very much, an unelected person. Okay, great. And essentially, the work's there, you have to go and get it. And maybe, if you're not campaigning for, BNP of South Derbyshire, you might be in Alveston actually doing the work. But there's no point sending this to scrutiny, because we've sat in scrutiny before, and we've looked at other measures that would address reducing the democratic cost of running this council, like 4-year all-out terms. And it hasn't got anywhere. So reducing the democratic resource is absolutely pointless. It's headline politics. And frankly, it's about as affectatious or as self-aggrandising or as transparent as the lectern you read it from, okay, frankly.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton, for that.
Councillor Hussain.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say a little bit about the damage austerity is doing to our communities. Obviously, austerity is forcing people on hardships. Number of people who are below poverty has gone up significantly in my ward. And I think people who are relying on food banks, etc., has significantly gone up. When times are hard...
Mr Mayor, can I raise a point of order? Because, as I understand it, under CP64, we're still discussing the amendment. Nothing that Councillor Hussain has said, with respect, has anything to do with the amendment.
I will get round to...
You can only address the...
I've got to put things in context.
Mr Mayor, I'm still on my point of order. Councillor Hussain must, and can only, under the standing orders of this council, address the amendment. The amendment doesn't contain any of the issues that Councillor Hussain has spoken about, so therefore his contribution thus far is out of order.
No, it's not. The first paragraph is still included. Paragraph 1.
1 is still included. He's talking about paragraph 1, it's still in there. You're on the right track, are you? Paragraph 1 is still.
Thank you, Councillor Hickson. I believe, after consulting with the officer, that Councillor Hussain is entitled to link his views to the amendment as was stated in the original motion. So if he's trying to do that, then I will allow it. If I feel that he's not going to be doing that in the next few minutes, I will tell him accordingly.
Yeah. When times are hard, then it's essential that we have councillors who make sure that the money which is available is actually spent wisely. So therefore, any reduction on our ability to monitor where the money is being spent. Quite a lot of people think that the spend which is available to the council is the money which comes through revenue support grant from the government, which is around 200 million. But the total spend which is at the council's disposal is actually around about 600 million. So the reductions which are proposed in the amendment will probably amount to 0.05. It will be less than, significantly less than 0.5%. In terms of proposals put forward by Councillor Hickson, I think there is some merit in us considering whether or not it is appropriate time for us to refer the whole matter to the boundary commissions. I have some sympathy for that. But to suggest that it ought to perhaps go back to the scrutiny commission, in my view, also has some merit. But I would still think, on balance, I would stick by the substantive amended motion because the way the original motion was worded is significantly flawed. And I think Councillor Banwit quite rightly suggested a very relevant amendment, and the group has stuck by it. So I will not actually, under the circumstances, advocate accepting of Councillor Hickson's amendment for the reasons I've just outlined.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. I'd just like to remind our next speakers that we are talking about the amendment and that Councillor Hickson has put forward. The amendment that Councillor Benwaite put forward has been passed. The original motion that Councillor Graves put has been lost, so we are now talking about the amendment by Councillor Hickson to what Councillor Benwaite suggested. So if we stick to that, we'll be okay. There's no need for reference to the original motion. That has been defeated, so we're now talking just about the amendment. So who is it next?
It's Councillor Higginbottom. It's Councillor Higginbottom, and then it's Councillor Titley, and then it's Councillor Holmes. It's Councillor Higginbottom next.
Councillor Higginbottom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the amendment from Councillor Hickson, I agree that the public are entitled not just to the reassurance of the current system, but they need to be demonstrated too that the system is fit for purpose. What I believe this fails to do is have the honest debate about the current system and where it sits with neighbourhood working, because the numbers were defined before we had neighbourhood working. As was said earlier on, there are neighbourhood officers in place now which weren't in place during neighbourhood panel days. What this fails to do is us have the honest debate and say the work isn't there as it used to be. And if we differentiate between what a councillor's role is and party political campaigning, and we just did the job, rolled our sleeves up and got the job done, then we might be more honest with ourselves and say what is council work and what is campaigning, and what's going to look for problems which turn into campaigns. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, can I just say one thing before I ask the next speaker? Look, I don't think it's fair for any one of us, regardless of what party we are in, to suggest that our fellow councillors don't have enough caseload, because we don't know their caseload. So, you know, to get up and say, well, there is not enough work being done by councillors, how does an individual of any party know what the others are doing? I mean, I could tell you about the caseloads that we have in our ward. You know, I, as a mayor, have to help my fellow colleagues out with the casework. So, whatever has been said, I think you should disregard that point totally, that the fact that there isn't enough work for council. There is work, and nobody knows other than the councillors that are doing it. Councillor Titley.
I was actually scratching my head, Mr Mayor, but since you invite me to speak, I think I will. On the amendment, my view is quite clear. This is very much about the whole theme of this, and it's been in the literature put forward by UKIP about increasing democracy by reducing councillors. Councillor Hickson has said it quite rightly. It is subject to any changes in boundary or the number of seats are subject to a change by the electoral review body. They're not decided here, far from it. And Councillor Graves very much knows that to be the case. Now, in terms of this amendment, I don't see any value in taking it to the scrutiny board. None at all, because, again, it then takes us into the position of, well, why don't we decide? Well, with respect to Councillor Hickson, we can't. From my personal point of view, and I've been a councillor with a 4 years gap, from 2004 onwards, I've only seen caseload increase. And as the officers will tell you, I'm quite good at giving them casework and doing it myself. So I don't accept the argument that casework's gone down. What I do accept is this: in a reduced economic environment where we've still got to take £81 million out, we do not know how that structure will look. And to say that we need less councillors is about winning votes in key areas for UKIP. I understand that. But does it really serve democracy? And more importantly, does it really serve the people that we're supposed to represent? In my view, it does not. Because Councillor Dinser has already made reference to the fact that actually we had 64 councillors representing the citizens of Derby when we went from a district authority with county seats down to unitary. And I think, if my memory serves me right, that was in 2002, and I was active in the Labour Party then, so I well remember that, all of that occurring. So I would say to you that the present position is that we certainly have enough councillors, and if everybody did the casework, and there's been a suggestion here tonight that some people don't have a lot of casework, then they'd actually find that there'd be a load of work to do, because there is in Ulverston, and there are in other cities, there are in other wards, particularly in the inner cities of this inner city area of this city. So I hear the debate. I understand why it's been made. It's been made, or initiated rather, by UKIP to feature in a newsletter, and I look forward to reading it.
Thank you, Councillor Titley. You can now go back to scratching your head again, and we're sorry to disturb you. Councillor Matthew Holmes, would you like to speak?
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. It was just to say, I know you want to get home to watch Robson Jerome's Extreme Fishing tonight, so can we move to the vote?
It's all right. The Extreme Fishing programme I'm not interested in, but I do like them singing. Thank you. Councillor Nater, I'm sorry, you're too late. Right, we'd like to move this amendment to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment?
Just scratching my head, Mr Mayor.
17. So those against.
If you want to... Councillor Repton, if you want to go home, I suggest you let me get on with it. Those against the amendment, you can stick your hand up now. The amendment is lost.
Move to the vote, Mr Mayor.
We'll let Councillor Benwaite sum up.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I think it's important to summarise what this motion is actually about now. It is about fair deal for Derby. It's about putting our party differences aside and campaigning in the common interest of the residents of Derby to get a fair deal for Derby. Because statistically we have proven, and the LGA has presented figures, to show that cities like Derby are being hammered by government cuts, whereas in other parts of the country people are benefiting. And the reality is, if you live in the Prime Minister's West Oxfordshire constituency, you actually gain as a result of government cuts, whereas in actually Derby, per the population, you lose, and you lose badly. These are actual statistics. They're based on facts. So this is about campaigning for a fair deal for Derby, capturing that Bombardier spirit, which Councillor Hickson led on. So the decision now to be made is, will you support a fair deal for Derby?
CP 64, a quote for everybody. This motion was put by Alan Graves, so why isn't he summing up? This is an amendment.
Councillor Kerr, there is such a thing as paying attention. Councillor Graves' motion was lost. The amendment was carried that was proposed by Councillor Benwaite. The amendment proposed by Councillor Hickson was lost, so he is now speaking on the substantive.
So clearly Councillor Kerr wants to be Mayor, Mr Mayor, wants to chair this chamber, but I look forward to her never getting that opportunity. So thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to finish. So this is about fair deal for Derby. It's about campaigning this government to keep frontline services going in our city, to keep statutory services functioning as effectively as possible in the interest of Derby residents. The very Derby residents which Councillor Graves spoke in the interest of, and I agree with him. This is about putting the residents of Derby first. So it's an opportunity now, as much as Councillor Higginbottom likes to sometimes I don't understand exactly what she says, but I think she alludes to the fact of being a bit of a people's champion. And Councillor Graves clearly, suggested that he has the interests of people of Derby at heart. So I think it's an opportunity now for people to make that absolutely clear. So, Mr Mayor, I would like to move this to the vote, but the decision is absolutely quite clear. Would you support, would the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives and UKIP, would they like to come round the table to sit with this administration, putting our party differences aside, so we won't necessarily be sitting as Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat, but as community leaders of this city to lobby this government and future governments, and the lobbying can go ahead to the Labour Party as well, about fighting for a fair deal for Derby. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benwaite. Actually, with your sort of interjection with the Councillor Kerr and a couple of others, you might have forgotten that your motion is already passed. Right? So
For the sake of clarity, we'll vote on this, given that the amendment was lost. We'll vote on Councillor Benwaite's
we can, just for sort of clarity, we can vote again, but your amendment was passed. So those in favour of Councillor Benwaite's...
Recorded vote, Mr Mayor, recorded vote.
Quite clearly, there's 10 people who are tired of sitting down and they just stood up, right? So,
would members please indicate when I call their name whether they wish to vote for or against the motion as amended, as the carried amendment? Councillor Afzal. Councillor Ashburner. Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Barker. Councillor Bayliss. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dinser. Councillor Eldred. Councillor Graves. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Heselgrave. Councillor Hickson. Councillor Higginbottom.
Against.
Councillor Hillier, not here. Councillor Alison Holmes. Councillor Matthew Holmes. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Ingle. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jennings. Councillor Keith. Councillor Jangir Khan. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Martin. Councillor Nater. Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Pegg. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Redfern. Councillor Repton. Councillor Russell. Councillor Sandhu. Councillor Shankar. Councillor Skelton. Did she vote? Sorry. Councillor Stanton. Councillor Titley. Councillor Troop. Councillor Troop. Councillor Turner. Councillor Webb. Councillor Whitby. Councillor Williams. Councillor Wood. Councillor Wright. Abstentions 1, 2, 3, 4, 24. Yeah. 4, 24. Against 14. Abstentions 6. The motion as amended is carried.
Right. Councillor Benwade's amendment has been carried for the second time in the night, and we're not going to have a rerun. Thank you very much. But now, for our third motion, now, I was going to say this won't take any long, but bearing in mind I'm sort of 1.5 hours behind schedule already, I won't tempt fate. So it's Councillor Eldred to propose, and seconded by Councillor Martin. Councillor Martin.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start by welcoming brothers and sisters from the Transport Salaried Staff Association and Unite Unions who've joined us in the gallery this evening to hear the debate. If you're still here, thank you for being so patient, and you probably deserve a medal. In August, the government announced that regulated rail fares, which include season tickets, could increase by up to 5.5%. In the face, however, of public outcry and protest by trade unions and campaigning groups, they were forced to backtrack and subsequently set fares to rise by 2.5% from January next year. This is, however, at best a sticking plaster and at worst a cynical ploy to appeal to voters in the run-up to the general election. A 2.5% increase on rail fares would still add around £184 to the cost of a standard season ticket from Derby to London and around £76 to the cost of a standard season ticket from Derby to Birmingham, compounding the cost of living crisis facing commuters and their families. The UK already has the highest rail fares in Europe, in some cases double the cost of travel by rail in countries such as France, Germany and the Netherlands, where the rail networks are held almost entirely in public ownership. Ticket prices have risen over 20% since the Tories came to power in 2010. Over the same period, average earnings have risen by just 10.7%. We need a sustainable solution to the soaring cost of rail travel. We need an immediate freeze on rail fares to bring relief to thousands of rail commuters struggling to meet the cost of their season tickets. We need a long-term commitment to cap rail fares and overhaul the complex, fragmented ticketing system to make it easier for people to find affordable travel options. Like they did when we debated the NHS, the Tories may try to tell you that rail fares are not a matter for this chamber and that we should, as a council, be focused on local issues. I firmly believe, however, Mr Mayor, that this is a local issue, an issue which impacts thousands of Derby residents on a daily basis. Derby is a major interchange station and there are an estimated 3 million journeys to and from Derby Station each year. An estimated 270,000 of these journeys are made by season ticket holders who will be directly impacted by the latest fare increases. As a city, we have a proud rail heritage and play an important role in the rail industry. The people of Derby have a strong interest in ensuring we have a sustainable, efficient and affordable railway, and as an authority we need to support this aspiration. In reality, the current rail system is broken. Privatisation has been a catastrophic failure, decimating our rail manufacturing industry and serving only to line the pockets of train operators and their shareholders whilst increasing the burden on the taxpayer. Since privatisation, it's estimated that the cost to the taxpayer of running the railways has more than doubled. Much of the increase in cost is a direct result of the unwieldy and complex privatised railway structure created by the Tories. Until recently, when the government was forced to reclassify Network Rail as a public body, these costs included the high interest payments needed in order to keep Network Rail off the government's balance sheet. Other costs include debt write-offs, costs rising as a result of fragmentation, profit margin of layers and layers of contractors and subcontracts, and dividend payments to private investors. If these unnecessary costs were eliminated, they could save the taxpayer £1.2 billion a year. These savings, Mr Mayor, could then fund an immediate, across-the-board 18% reduction in rail fares. Instead, train operating companies post billions of pounds of profit every year off the back of huge government subsidies. 66% of the British public think that the railway should be brought back into public ownership. Surely it's time for us to listen to them. With several major franchises up for renewal in the next few years, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take back franchises into public ownership as they expire. The East Coast Main Line service, which has been run by directly operated railways on behalf of the Department of Transport since 2009, has been one of Britain's most successful train operators, returning £1 billion to the Treasury over 5 years and providing very high levels of customer satisfaction. Despite this success, the government is determined that the franchise will be reprivatised. Proof yet again that this government is driven by neoliberal ideology and not what is in the best interests of the public. It's time for a bold change to our railway system. It's time to put people before profit and restore the notion of the railways as a public service. It's time to put ideology aside and do what makes logical sense to help build a sustainable, affordable railway for now and future generations. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eldred. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak or reserve the right?
I'll second the motion but reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I agree with this motion. We will be supporting this motion. I'm not entirely in agreement with much of what Councillor Eldred just said, because I worked for the railways when they were a nationalised industry, and they were worse than it is now. So that's my first point. The second is, because the thrust of this motion is that they're saying the franchising system needs a review, I completely agree with that. I was never convinced in the first place that the franchising model was the best one to go for, and it clearly has failed. It is complex and difficult, and it does need a complete overhaul. This motion does not call for what Eldred was just calling for, which is complete renationalisation of the railways. So I am in support of that, and I agree with her about directly operated rail. But there must be other models that need a looking at. I would also point out that she's only painted the worst picture. I travel regularly by rail, and I have to pay, unlike my good friend Mr Ashburn here, who gets them free, and former Councillor Roberts, who also gets them free. So I know what the costs are. I travel to Leeds at the weekend, return fare for £22, walk-on fare. I travel to Leicester regularly, return fare £6.95. I can't drive for that, so don't paint the whole picture, Councillor Eldred, that the fares are unaffordable. Some of them are affordable if you're flexible and sensible about how you're booking them. But having said all of that, I agree the franchising system isn't working and it does need an overhaul, and I shall be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Jolly decent of you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Nater.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I support this motion as well, quite simply on the grounds that it impacts on working class people. And under successive governments, there's been increases. So It's not whether the Tories or the Labour people did that. And, you know, the impact has hugely impacted the working class people that have to commute regularly to work. And I've been speaking to a lot of people that are totally disheartened yet another increase. So the impact, it is literally on working class people.
Thank you, Councillor Nato. We're on a roll. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to first of all begin by congratulating Councillor Eldred on bringing this motion before us tonight. I think it is a very important issue and one that will be of great interest to the travelling public in Derby and further afield. So I do want to thank you and also the campaigners who are here in the public balcony for coming along this evening to make these very important points. The cost of transport, including rail fares, is very much part of a cost of living crisis, which has been highlighted by the Labour Party nationally. And I think it's quite shocking to look at the statistics in this motion, that since 2010, the average rail fare has increased by 21.5%, 3 times more than wage increase. And that's just having an absolutely devastating effect, taken alongside rises in energy costs, taken alongside rising costs in food, to make everyday life unaffordable for many, many people in this country. So it's absolutely commendable that Councillor Eldred has brought this, and there are people out there in the community who are willing to campaign and take on the cost of train fares and the hikes. I do also, as it happens, actually agree with everything Councillor Eldred said in terms of the need to review the franchise system. Privatisation of the rail industry back in the mid-1990s was supposed to provide cheap and affordable travel for the public, and it was also supposed to deliver revenues for the Treasury, when exactly the opposite has happened. 21.5% increase in rail fares, putting it out of reach of many people. And Councillor Carr's perfectly right. You can get deals and offers at certain times of the day, and if you book 10 years in advance or whatever it might be. But for some people who have to travel at certain specific times, rail fees are fixed and they are very, very expensive. And that has an effect on individuals, and it actually also has an effect on business people who are having to send their employees to be in London at 9 o'clock at the start of the business day, particularly for small business, paying £150, £160 to get to London at that time of day is quite frankly outrageous. So it's not just about individuals, it's about small businesses as well. And the government's privatised rail service has manifestly failed to deliver its objectives. Instead of returning proceeds to the Treasury, it's actually a means of generating profits for private rail companies from taxpayers. So absolutely the system we have needs a thorough overhaul. The East Coast Main Line service has led the way. It shows what can be done. The public sector can provide an excellent service. It can absolutely get things right and give an excellent service on that line. So that is very much the model that we need to be following going forward. So very much support this motion. Thank you to Councillor Eldred for bringing it, and to the campaigners in the balcony for the work that you're doing to highlight this issue and to bring it to the attention of members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I too congratulate Councillor Eldred on her, I believe, her maiden speech, because it's a long time since I've heard such an impassioned speech to this Council. Certainly it's the first one this evening that's been worth listening to. My own credentials on this matter, I was for many years an appointed member of the Rail Passengers Committee for the Midlands, and I chaired the Midland Main Line, that's the line from here to London, the Passenger Representation Committee. So I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I also spend many thousands of pounds a year on rail fares. So that is relevant. This group will not be voting against this motion. I can say that now. But what was spoken by Councillor Eldridge was very much, as in the motion, a TUC statement, and we ought to take it in that context. There wasn't an announcement last month. What happens every year, and happened through the 13 years of Labour misrule that this country had, is that the RPI is announced, the Retail Price Index, and the rules under which rail fares are regulated fares, that's not all fares, it's the regulated ones, have to work to an average of the RPI, which was 2.5%, plus 1. That makes it 3.5%. Some can go up to 5.5%, yes, and very few, but they have to be balanced by ones that come down. So it's an average of RPI plus 1. The government can't do much about that. Your government did absolutely nothing about it for 13 years, particularly under the Lord Prescott of wherever it is, being in charge of our railways and trying to meddle with them. If you want to renationalise the railways, say so at your conference next week. Frankly, I don't care who owns the railways as long as they get there on time and give an efficient service. And I think that is a much better attitude towards it. In fact, we have a bit of a mixed economy at the moment. And the reason I know that this is a TUC statement is that it contains an error. And it contains the same error in the motion as in the TUC statement, where it talks about the East Coast mainline services being run by direct operator. That isn't fully the case. It's the East Coast franchise. There are other companies using the East Coast mainline. So be careful what you use on those statistics. Money from fares goes to pay for more trains, better stations, faster services on Europe's fastest growing, safest and most improved railways. In the next control period, and that's the next 5 years, £38 billion is being invested in improving the network. Derby benefits from that. Please realise the Bombardier spirit has been exhorted this evening. That money is spent very largely in Derby. So working class Derby people that you keep talking about are benefiting from investment in the railways, far greater than it has done ever before, and in the next 5 years we shall see the benefits of that, particularly with electrification coming through the Midland Main Line. Nothing to do with HS2, that's completely separate from that control period. So you have to be careful when you start scaremongering about a price increase here or a price increase there. You seem to want to control the price of food in the supermarkets. You want to control, like Marx would try to do, the rail fares. You're quite happy for the cost of driving a car to go up. That goes up every year. No control on that. No RPI plus 1 on the price of petrol. You're perfectly happy for that to happen. And that affects far more commuters from Derby than use the trains. I had to look at this to see that I was still in Derby, because if this was a political statement in Dartford or Dorking or Dagenham, yeah, you'd have a point that most of their people go by train every day. Yes, Derby's important, but it's not the majority of commuters that we have here. I don't want fares to rise. No, nobody does. I don't want anything to rise. I don't want the price of milk to rise. But I don't think we can do very much about it here. Writing to the Patrick McLaughlin, the Transport Secretary, and asking him to freeze fares actually means they reduce. That is bad for Derby, because that money isn't coming into our economy. And council research, you might find that actually we're getting some more money. Come back, Dave Roberts, always forgiven.
Thank you, Councillor Wood, because you do realise that after your opening remarks you'll now be an independent. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. And I do welcome the support for our motion tonight. And I also congratulate Lisa on bringing this motion. I'm very pleased to support it. Clearly, the rail system we have at the moment does not represent value for the money, for the public. The public subsidy has gone up 2 or 3 times in the last 20 years since privatisation. So in terms of subsidy, Councillor Carr, the situation now is far worse than it was then. We have a system that is fragmented and it's very complex, and that actually increases the cost of the system, and this was acknowledged by the McNulty Review. Passengers are faced with a very complex pricing system. They're never sure if they've got the best deal or not. And it is very nice for Councillor Carr that he does get some good deals. But I do think Claire Perry, the Rail Minister's recent advice that people should just book in advance is a little bit dismissive for all those people who can't work out the computer system or who have to, the online booking system, or who have to travel every day. And Councillor Wood, in terms of your point about caps on fares, it is true that Labour introduced that RPI +1 in 2002, but the current Labour team, front bench team, are absolutely committed to ending the flex system, the capping system, and putting in a fixed cap. So hopefully that will work in actually bringing down fares. The government has recently frozen the fare increases for next year at least, and that is welcome, but it doesn't actually address the underlying problems in the industry because it's too fragmented and it's too complex. And most importantly, and I feel that this goes back to the NHS motion which we looked at last time, is that basically what we have is a so-called market model, but it's not really a market. Huge public subsidies go into the rail industry, over 5 billion last year. Other European countries have accepted that railways are a vital part of a nation's infrastructure, and they plan their services and their subsidies over the medium to long term, and that actually helps their domestic rail manufacturing industry, which is a problem we've had in the UK, as we in Derby have known too well a few years ago with Bombardier. So what we have in the UK is a system that's based on not efficiency and profit, but it's chaos and subsidy. Because it's so contrived to look like a market system, when really it's just a game of shuffling subsidies in a pretend market. For example, about half of the train operating companies pay a premium to the Department of Transport, and the others are recorded as actually receiving a subsidy. But even those who are actually paying a recorded premium to the government are in fact subsidised through revenue support and the network grant. The network grant is the $4 billion paid last year to Network Rail to maintain the network, which means they can charge the TOCs much less for track access, which is a subsidy. So when these subsidies are considered, only 3 TOCs are actually paying a premium to the government, and one of those is, not surprisingly, the East Coast mainline franchise. So what we've got here is very complex subsidies and a very fragmented system and various franchising fiascos, such as the one we had a few years ago with the West Coast mainline. And what we also have is some of the highest fares, as we've said, in Europe. Now, again, Councillor Wood, I would address you. Passengers are told that money from the rail fares actually goes to bringing in investment in the system, and we do welcome investment in the system. But actually, the McNulty Review also pointed out that there's little relationship between fare increases and investment plans in the system. So to sum up, I do support and welcome investment in the rail industry, particularly HS2. I do acknowledge all the work of the managers and the staff who work in the industry. But let's be honest, the railways, it was a botched privatisation, and it's got an unworkable structure. And we need to review the franchising system. We need to have an overall structure for planning and strategy in the system. And we need to get affordable fares for everyone in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Anybody else with their hands up or stretching their heads? So we'll just go straight to Councillor Eldred for the summing up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I do indeed welcome the support of both the Conservative Group and the Liberal Democrats. And I thank Councillor Wood for his compliments on the passionate nature of my speech. I will, however, leave it for him to debate with members of his own group about who else was worth listening to this evening, if that is his opinion. Just a couple of comments that have already been made, but just to sum up. The reality is that the majority of rail users don't have the choice in terms of when they travel. They don't have the flexibility to book in advance. Commuters have to travel at a certain time. They have to be in places at particular times, and therefore they are very constricted in terms of the fares that they have to pay for. But also, in terms of the situation in Derby, maybe if we did have more affordable rail fares, then more people from Derby would actually use our rail network, and we would get more people out of their cars and into trains, which would surely be in the best interests of everybody and the environment. So really, just to sum up, I thank people for the support. I think the reality is that we live in a very different world to the world that we lived in 2002, when the RPI plus 1% was brought in. Real wages have only increased by 0.7% over the last year, so you're not even keeping up with the pace of inflation, let alone a 2.5% increase in rail fares. There is a cost of living crisis in this country. Working people are suffering, and this is just adding to that burden. But I urge you all to support this motion, and I hope that we can do something to support the campaigning in the coming months.
Thank you, Councillor Eldred. All those in favour, and quick, put your hands up. Any against? No.
Motion carried.
Motion carried.
End of the meeting.
Yeah. Can I just say thank you to everybody? It is nearly 7 minutes to 9 in the morning. So have a safe journey home, and we shall see you next time.